some focus groups, and I don't know exactly what the questions are or the specifics of discussion, but
It's fine. Good to be involved in for sure, so no issues, anyone have any issues?
I'll do it.
Okay, so two, I don't think two will be an issue.
I will probably go to the one in the morning,
Well, I can't do the morning, I'd have
so
to do.
maybe you can go to the one in the evening.
Perfect. Anyone else,
Will
any
you let
problems
Carrie
with that?
know, or do you want me to let her know?
50-50 I forget, so we can both try and remember.
And then it'll be 100% between the two of us. Okay.
So send me an email with the time and.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, we ready?
Sure.
Can we ask them to quiet down nicely?
Probably just shut the door.
Yeah, if we shut the door.
Is there someone who's a Boy Scout or Girl Scout mom or dad that could ask them?
I was.
Just walk over and tell them to zip it.
Oh, it's that door right there. It's the hard door.
It's closed.
She's CC'd on it.
Need a solid door there instead of a hollow door.
Insulation.
That's a solid.
No. Alright. It's public. Good to go?
Austin, do we know who's on Zoom?
They can come later.
Yes, Pete.
Just me?
Yep.
Is he on? Anything before Austin takes over? You good?
No, we're good.
Good, okay.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening. Here to talk about the preliminary recommended budget for fiscal year '26. This is the first of two nights. We have a long list of town departments tonight, and tomorrow will be Public Safety and Public Works Department. Just to roll through, I'll try to be brief over the next few slides. The budget book that was published just about a month ago is available on the town website. This is the budget book that contains the preliminary recommended budget, as well as the first iteration of what a modified budget would look like, as well as some overall analysis. That's available on Rutland and Madoc.gov/finance.
Not to be a
Yep,
picky, but Pete's not the clerk, I am.
I know that. I didn't get to change that.
Okay.
Before it was published. Sorry. I won't go through all this, but just to give folks an idea what this budget process has looked like to date. Starting back, actually even before September, but we presented an initial multi-year forecast to the board, and since then we've been, having either monthly or bi-monthly updates to the board or finance committee as well. And we started kind of the budget development process in the fall, and we are here tonight to have town departments present their recommended budgets to you folks. Just to start real quick, the next few slides will just be an overall review of our revenue position. Not too much change from previous years. Obviously, we collect the regular Prop 2.5 on our tax levy. New growth, which we'll have another slide, we are conservatively estimating $250,000 in new growth. Our excluded debt continues to go down both on the town and the school side, with exception of Bay Path, a slight increase on the excluded debt service there. State aid, we're projecting a slight increase based off of the governor's House 1 budget. I think that we'll definitely have to continue to monitor state aid over the next few months once the legislature finalizes their budget figures. And we are level funding local receipts. Transfers in is payments for the community television program, and as a part of our forecasting policy, we are not including use of any one-time funds for this budget projection. Just to give you an idea for our new growth, since 2015, as you can see, most of our new growth has been on the residential side. We've had some pretty good years on personal property and commercial property, but we are still overwhelmingly a residential community. Any new building incorporates, in addition to our tax levy growth. FY25, we were just over $500,000, but again, just taking a look at the economy and also just history, we are conservatively estimating $250,000 in new growth. On the local receipts, just to give you an idea what the breakdown is between the detail on local receipts, obviously a large portion of our local receipts is our motor vehicle excise. We, per Department of Revenue, we actually need to level fund our local receipts unless we can justify an increase. So we, I think, continue to do okay on local receipts, especially in terms of building permit activity for our licenses and permits. But again, trying to be conservative with our local receipts budgeting as well. I mentioned state aid, presentation to the board a month ago, provided a history. Candidly, we don't get as much state aid, I think, as we should, and also as much as the state has collected. While we appreciate the modest increase of about $40,000, again, as I mentioned earlier, the legislature has yet to actually talk about their budget, present their budget for Ways and Means on the House or Senate side. So, you know, I think that we'll have some tightening up there, but this is the governor's initial projection.
Austin, not to interrupt you, but just so you know, folks on Zoom cannot hear us. The cable is working on it, but just so we know, Pete can't hear us right now.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. On our expense side, sorry, there's a delay here on Zoom. Looks like it just froze. On Zoom. I'll proceed. Expenditures, one of the largest increases, some of the major drivers for us, and I apologize, this is not on the screen at this time. Cable, if you can please fix that. We are continuing to see a large increase in our fixed cost budget. We'll provide some detail with the treasurer collector, but just in our fixed cost budget alone is almost $500,000, 13% increase over our current fiscal year budget. It's largely driven by health insurance at just approximately 18% increase. We're also led to believe that we'll have more than just one additional family plan. We'll have, I think we're budgeting for 5 additional family plans for next year. Our pension assessment, I think, is up 12%, and general and property liability insurance is up 15%. So significant increases in our fixed cost budget. Also, just overall on education, we are continuing to see large increases in our assessments for both Wachusett and Bay Path. For Wachusett, approximately a 7.7% increase of $1.2 million. In Bay Path, due to the increase of 13 or 14 additional students, a 21.8% increase at $172,000 over fiscal year '25. I just want to give a moment for the table to figure this out.
Absolutely, buddy. You heard that came through.
Oh, it is? I didn't read that yet.
It just came.
That's good, there we go. So here's our net position, between available revenues and town and school expenditures. With our level services budget, our net position is, as has been talked about for months now, just over $2 million. So with that being said, I want to start by rolling into the town department presentations. We're going to start first with the treasurer collector's office, led by our treasurer collector, Nick George. Right here, Nick. You can find it on page 28 of your budget book.
Austin, I still can't hear him.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. So the treasurer collector's office, we're responsible for the overall collections on water and sewer bills, stormwater, real estate, motor vehicle. We handle interdepartment receipts, whether it's coming from Board of Health, building permits, select board, all those sorts of fees. We oversee the town's debt, cash flow, benefits of the town. Our office currently has 3 employees. There's myself, the assistant treasurer collector who's full-time, and a part-time financial clerk. For FY '26, just going down the list, for personal services, we have a 3.57% increase. This is the 3.5% COLA, and then a step per the CBA that the assistant treasurer collector and financial clerk follow. The big jump in the purchase of services account is 2 things. One is the annual GASB reporting that's being moved from the accounting line item to the treasurer's budget. And the other is for the lockbox services. So the way it was set up previously was we were required to have X amount of dollars on file, on deposit in a low yield savings account with our lockbox provider. In exchange, they would not charge us for the lockbox service, but based on the current interest rates, it's more beneficial for the town to invest that X amount of dollars into a higher yield money market or CD, and earn us more in the long run. And then purchase of supplies went up 4.5%. This is just from cost of goods going up with the current times we're in. One big thing alone is the postage, sending out notices to people. It's not cheap anymore. I'm pretty sure the typical stamp that we're charging 69 cents right now for a single letter. And then there's no changes to the other charges and expenses at this time.
Before we roll on to our fixed cost budget, does anyone have any questions on the treasurer collector's budget?
Just, can you just say again, the big jump in purchase services was moving mostly for what again?
So there was a expense that accounting was paying out. It's the GASB report that looks at the OPEB actuary. And the second one was the lockbox services. So before, the lockbox was being covered by our financial institution. In exchange, we had to keep 500,000, $1 million on account with them in a low yield account. But based on the current interest rates, it's more beneficial for the town to pay for the lockbox service and receive a 4.25% interest rate on that $500 million. $500,000 million, not $500 million.
So
So if you got 500 million, that'd be
which
cool.
accounting line was that being transferred from?
Purchase services,
So
actually, there was a,
It's a cost every 2 years, so it wasn't in my budget in '25 either.
Okay.
Cause it's only needed every other year. For some reason, the prior accountant had it in the accounting, but it's something that is a responsibility of the treasurer collector for the actuarial
Okay.
every 2 years. So there was a separate line item. I think, I honestly don't remember how much it was,
6,000.
but it's not in '25, it was in the town accountants in '24. And so it's something that the treasurer does every 2 years.
In the purchase services though?
No, so.
No, I think it had its own separate line item called
It's called the
actuarial.
OPEB
Oh, I see, the
actuarial study.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's on the next page in the book.
I'm just trying to add up.
I'm guessing it's roughly $7K for cost for that line.
Yeah, so for fiscal year '26, I reached out to our actuary, 6,700 for the cost of that study.
Okay.
What was the purpose of the lockbox? We don't actually keep money in there, do we?
So for the lockbox account, the way it was set up was the bank was waiving the fees for the lockbox if we kept X amount of dollars within one of their low yield accounts. So we have two accounts with them. We have one a low yield checking account, which the interest rate was minimal. I wanna say maybe 0.25%. And then the second account we have with them is a money market account, which is a more favorable rate.
Lockbox is where you receive money in a bank.
It's where we pay
So
all our
the,
bills
I mean, I
to.
know what a lockbox is, I'm just trying to figure out, when you mentioned 500,000, it's like, we actually don't keep that in a lockbox.
no, when I say lockbox,
we mean
it's
at the
through
bank.
People's Bank. So
It's
that
at the bank,
address on
that
the,
when we pay our bills, we pay it to there, and they send the report to make it easier than them having to open all the envelopes.
So the money we're getting goes into the lockbox.
Correct.
Any stuff that we deposit
It's at the bank.
goes into a lockbox, not actually into the bank?
It is in the bank. It's a lockbox account at the bank.
Okay.
It's not in a box with a lock.
It's not a traditional lockbox.
It is not a
lock.
lock box.
No,
Okay.
It's only a lockbox in name.
that's right.
If we could keep
It's a term.
if we could keep it moving, we can talk about lockboxes all night.
Well, no, I'd like
That's
to
right.
understand.
We need
Yeah,
to
yeah,
understand
yeah,
it.
no, yeah.
Okay?
But it's a service that we're paying a little bit extra for more advantageous rates for the town, right? Alright, next is our undistributed expenses, budget on page 27.
so for going off what Austin said, the health insurance market is not a pretty place right now. Across the state, treasurers through other municipalities are seeing anywhere between 15 and 25%. In their rates, there's no single rate increases anymore, never mind a decrease. With our projections, we have 5 family plans joining us on the 18% increase, and the dental rates are going up 2.5%. I wish it was the other way around, but unfortunately it's not. For the purchase of supplies, that is our liability insurance, that's going up 15%. Following status of the market through Maya. And then for our other financing, uses of debt, we do have some debt falling off. Looking at my notes here, we're just following along the debt schedules for the library, public safety building, DPW building, and the school borrowing we currently have.
Questions on that budget?
Are we gonna cover all 3 budgets tonight or just this one?
Just this one.
But I have a question. This is the 2.5 override.
Yep.
If it doesn't pass, are you for the 2.5 or are you for something else?
For the 2.5 override, I have to be for the 2.5 override, otherwise we're looking at,
Okay. If it doesn't pass, if you're for it and it doesn't pass, then you're gonna have to cut your department.
understood.
If it doesn't pass, do you somewhat seem responsible for backing 2.5 if it doesn't pass?
Not at all.
Okay,
Yeah, with all due respect, Harry, this is the budget we're recommending. The board has given direction, has yet to decide a budget. The board has given direction to prepare reduced budgets, which we have done so. And you've personally received correspondence from the treasurer collector's office on what the impact would be. So certainly if you have questions about the impact of that, but I don't believe it's an appropriate question to ask a department head if they endorse an override or not.
well, my question was, they're the ones that are gonna have to tell their employees that this is what happened.
Yeah, through the board. Yep. Do you have questions?
If it's not the right time for this, let me know, but I know there was a insurance advisory committee meeting. Is there any discussion on insurance adjustments in general?
Yeah, you can give a little bit of detail on that, right?
Yeah, so the IEC met yesterday, and we had representatives from Maya, Harvard Pilgrim, and our third party insurance liaison, if you will, Brian Boyle there. And the companies discussed the current status of the market and the way things are. And then IEC had a discussion on which direction it's essentially submitted a recommendation for. And I was gonna work on more formal notice to the board, but, it seems that they are in favor of the Harvard Pilgrim continuing with the plan they have now. The proposals that came in from both Blue Cross, through Maya and Harvard Pilgrim, Blue Cross basically said they'd match Harvard Pilgrim's plan at the 18% increase. Identical plans, identical premium amounts, same cover, summary of benefits, and the IAC was weary that walking into a 2-year agreement with Maya, that second year is unpredictable. They could say it's a 25% jump, and you have to take it.
And we did ask both carriers to provide, we had a plan design opportunity, shifting, I think, the deductibles, which only resulted in approximately a 3% decrease on the 18%, but also that quite literally doubles the deductibles for employees.
Yeah.
Which was not favorable by IAC. Questions about the town share, I don't think we're in a position to do that, just simply due to the fact it's in our collective bargaining agreements, it's gonna take some time to bargain that with the, each of the unions. And we need more time to be able to plan something like that.
Is that for the retirees as well?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, can we move on? Thank you, Nick. Next is the assessor's office, led by Principal Assessor Amy Ivanowski. You can find her budget on page 30 of your budget book.
You know how many employees we have on our insurance plan?
Yes.
Sorry,
I can get to that in 2
Nick
seconds.
was here.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm gonna go to the insurance plan.
Oh, I think I can, I have something,
Yeah.
give me a minute.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, if we can let Amy roll on, we can get you that number.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
2
that's
seconds.
fine.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm the principal assessor. The assessor's office is responsible for property management, record management, information
Yes.
requests, forms and applications, land management, tax rate and billing, and GIS management. You'll see in my budget for FY '26, our increases are 4.3%, which is just an increase of a step for myself and my admin, and a COLA increase for myself and my admin. There are no increases in purchase services or supplies, and there was a request for other charges and expenses, which comes from education, conferences, membership, mileage. Everything's going up. We belong to Worcester County Assessors and Massachusetts County Assessors. Both membership increased this year, and the conferences increased too. Summer conference alone is $650 just to attend the conference. That's not including room and board and staying there or whatever else. So all these things are becoming very expensive, and we really need to be involved in these organizations and attend these conferences. We make our contacts. I learn much at these conferences, and be able to call on people at them is invaluable. So that's it for me.
Questions for Amy?
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
On this assessor purchase services,
Mhm.
went from 40,000 to 25?
Harry, you're talking about the wrong budget.
No, I'm
Yep.
talking
That was
about
a-
fiscal
Yeah, you have your-
25 budget.
you have your-
40,000?
Cut budget.
Budget.
No. Right here, fiscal
It's in the budget
25.
book,
It's in
Harry.
the budget book.
On page
Budget.
30 in the budget book.
Page 30.
So that's level funded for purchase services at 40,000.
That funds all of our software, our billing software, our CAMA software, our GIS costs, and our inspection budget.
40,000, okay. So that will allow you, what I'm saying is, that allows you to do a lot more than you can do now. The 40,000 gives you added benefits. It's not just price increases.
No, that covers our costs for, so far, our costs, because our camera system increased by $1,500 this year. Our Vadar increased, from last year to this year. GIS, like I put the chapter land layers on there, that was $1,800 that I didn't expect to fund.
Okay,
That all comes out of there.
okay.
Alright. Any other questions for Amy? Thank you, Amy. Appreciate it. Next is the accounting office, led by our finance director, town accountant Donna Kuchar. You can find her budget on page 29 of the budget book.
So I can answer that question, I'll start with that. So we have 34 on a family plan and 25 on an individual plan that are active employees. And then we have, for retirees, we have 4 under 65, so those costs are significantly higher. And then 21 on the supplemental.
What was that total then? Was that like 60?
Well, it's 59 active and 25 retirees.
So 84? Is that right? 84? Something like that? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so as for my budget, mine is very, very easy. I have my salary, my purchase services are the maintenance for my software and the town audits. The town audit is exactly what we were provided for a 3-year quote. And the financial software maintenance is a quote that I was able to receive for 6 years, so that won't change for me for 6 years. Next year will be my 3rd year of that. And then the last item, I have supplies, and then other expenses. And other expenses include training. There's a 1099 software that that I purchased for just to do 1099s because the IRS has changed all types of requirements as to how you can submit them. You can no longer mail them. That was $159 this year that I used the other expenses for. The other expenses is training that obviously with all of our departments, continual training is important. And so I would use that line item to do that. Any questions for me?
I guess I have a question if I may.
Yes.
This is probably for both you and Austin. I think that if I'm looking at the appropriate thing for under the account and other expenses, I see that you had requested $1,500 and Austin, you're making a $1,000 recommendation. And if that's kind of the education piece and everything, was that I just wanna hear kind of that perspective. I should have probably asked about that before, but.
Yeah, so I can add, so just generally, I took a look at and tried to have conversations with departments about what their requests were, and tried to meet them as much as possible. Obviously, I think we can't meet every department's request. You'll also notice that there's some, within my recommended budget line item on some other departments. I also just tried to even out the budget, so instead of asking for 6423, I would just do 6400 or 6500, so. But this is still an increase of about $600 for the town accountant's budget, based off of previous years. I would also kind of just look at previous year actuals and see what the actual spending was.
Thank you.
If I can with that one, and I'm fine with the 1,000, that we had that conversation.
Yeah.
However, to compare my prior year, I wasn't attending trainings because I was part-time as well, so that's why I think that there is a need for an increase in that line item.
Thank you. Yep.
Nice job, thank you. Any other questions? All right, moving on to the town clerk's office, led by town clerk Anita Carlson. You can find her budget on page 21 of the budget book. So this also covers town meetings / the town moderator salary and also the elections budgets.
No one else knew what to do with Randy, so he's
It's your
mine.
responsibility.
So there's basically no change in his stipend. The two wage line items for myself and for Ben show an increase. The town clerk's salary increase is based on the 2026 MTP scale. I think it's step 4. And then Ben's, the assistant town clerks, is based on a 34-hour work week, which is an increase from FY '25. He was at 28 hours, and then if you remember, it was increased last November, very appreciated, to 34 hours a week. We've been pushing for that for a long time. We're open to the public 34 hours a week, so it makes sense that the assistant town clerk is available during those hours, especially when the town clerk is away on vacation or ill. The town clerk additional salary is based on certification, which I earned in 2017, so that stays the same. You'll see a decrease, so there are 2 pretty healthy decreases in the budget, in election wages and then election purchase services. And basically, it's because last fiscal year, we had 3 elections. This year, it's only the, coming up next year, it's only the annual town election. So there's that considerable savings in election wages and then purchase services. The registrar's salary, it's provided for an MGL, and it's based on the number of registered voters in town, with the town clerk as a member of the Board of Registrars, which I am, and our population has increased, so that's why I think it's up $100. There's no change in the town clerk's purchase services. And there is an increase in the registrar's purchase services, and it's basically due to the fact that we've switched to a vendor rather than printing and stuffing the census in town. So there would be so that we won't be using any money in the postage account to send out our census. So there's where the balance goes there. And that's all it accounts for. No changes in any of the supplies accounts. And the only other increase is in the town clerk other purchases, and that's a $90 increase. And it's basically because membership in the Mass Town Clerks Association and the Worcester County Clerks Association has gone up a little bit, but other than that. Any questions?
For the assistant town clerk salary, is the 10% increase due to that Ben being that 34 hours for the
Yeah,
entire
from
fiscal
20
year now? So it's,
Yeah.
okay, just wanted to make sure that was-
Does the state or the federal government reimburse us at all for all the extra hours you guys put in during these elections?
Not a salaried employee. They don't care if I work 80, 90 hours a week,
But
which
you
we have
hire,
to
you
sometimes.
have to hire a lot of people to do
Right,
it.
and they do, but it goes back in the general fund, unfortunately.
So you never see it.
We used to see it in a special account in the clerks, and so it was easier because we could maintain that. Like there's been a couple of times over the year where we've had a special town election, and we've been able to fund it without, it's been in that account. But a couple of years ago, they changed the way the accounting is done, and it goes back into the general fund. I did the cost certifications from September and the presidential election. We won't see those probably until after July. And we do get reimbursed for mailing out ballots also. So Nick will see that money back he won't see that money back into the postage account, but.
Is it a internal within the town way that we account that money, or is it something that the government told us we had to do?
What I used to hear, Dan always put it into a separate account. And I know towns that have done it that way for years, other towns didn't, that it's always gone back. But the DOR pretty much came down and said, we're gonna do it our way, so.
Of course they did.
And Donna believes in following the DOR, which is fine with
No,
me. Yeah, you want her to do that.
Unfortunately, we have to.
I have a question. I appreciate kind of basing the requests off of the actuals and realizing that this year is not gonna hopefully be as heavy of an election season as previous. But I just wanna put it on everybody's radar that means we need to be mindful that there will be those fluctuations
Yep.
in that line item, and we need to be able, in years with multiple elections, we need to be mindful of that.
Basically, the way to look at it is, in an odd number year, there aren't any state or federal elections. So in the calendar year 25, it's the only one.
I just know from a budget, especially because we tend to budget down to the very last
Exactly.
dollar.
Yep.
That we just need to be mindful of it rather than.
It'll definitely have to go back up for 27, and as the state puts more and more pressure on us to do vote by mail and all that, it's just gonna, we can't handle it ourselves at all. We do have to have other people coming in, so. But all the hours that Ben worked extra, and we did have other election workers, that was part of the cost certification, so we'll see that.
Thank you, Anita. Next up is our inspectional services department, which consists of building, electrical, plumbing, and led by our building commissioner, Harold. You can find his budget on page 32 of your budget book.
I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to what I have to say, and I'm open to questions on anything. I think I'm pretty prepared, I hope. I've been trying. First of all, the whole reason for the building department is a couple things, well, quite a few things, actually. One is we're trying to assure, not guarantee, but assure public safety. Another is continuity of the code and making sure everything's safe. We do go through the Department of Public Safety. And the other, believe it or not, is, and I've talked to the select board already about this, is that we are part of the new growth. When you get a permit, it memorializes everything. We have the cost of the construction. I send that, and me and Amy do go together onto certain inspections. And I think it's very important to capture that growth and capture as much growth as we possibly can, because if we miss it 1 year, you lose it, probably in perpetuity. So we have a budget. First of all, we have a revenue stream of $220,000, give or take. We do put $40,000 into the general fund already. And we'll start going through the building, all of our expenses. Building inspector salary is going from 66 to 68. That's $2,500 more. That's kind of that's what we agreed on when I came here. I would start low and get a pretty good bump anyway. The second part is the alternates. I'm not raising anything on the alternates, and this is even before any cuts. Not raising anything on the alternates because we never used all of it last year. So, and I thought it was pretty healthy, except I just had a tumor taken on my neck. It's a long story, but we still have enough, I do believe, to get us through the rest of the year. So I'm thinking that we're going to keep it that level funding. So that's going to be 0.000% increase. With my inspectional cleric, she has a COLA raise, cost of living, and she also has a step raise. And that's, it sounds like a lot at 7.92%, but it's only $1,800. She doesn't make a lot of money. And then we have the gas inspector salary. That was a flat 2.01% increase, is $84. And then alternate wages have never changed. We're keeping it 0 because we went through the whole budget, and we found, what's, if we're not using it, why are we taking it? That's kind of how I see it. How do I know that was gonna happen? Anyway, plumbing inspector salary went up 2%, and that's $419 more. Plumbing alternate, again, all the alternates, we always have a little extra left over, so why would we increase it? If we increase it, we can do some ninja stuff with Austin and the accountant, I think. I don't think we're gonna need it though, to be honest. Electrical inspector salary went up 2%. Unfortunately, Lester passed away. We do have a new person, Dennis, great guy. He had no problem with the increase. Electrical inspector alternate, again, try to be kind of, trying to keep continuity. We have 0% increase on that. Personal, it's, okay, so the whole increase on everybody was 3.60. It sounds like a lot, but there's not a lot of money there, so if you give someone, $64, it shows as 2%, but it's really not it's not a big raise. And then we go, building inspector services. I kept that at 0, but this year is a 6-year change to the code, which is a major deal. So I did notice that the previous inspector didn't use all of that, so I kept it neutral, and that's how I see it. But we do have a lot of classes and all that coming in, because we have a lot of code changes. I'm gonna be doing a lot of classes for the builders also, I try to do that. So that's at 0. Electrical inspector, actually, we were talking to him, and we looked at it, and $773, it was only $23, but it's we took 2.98% off that. We spent a lot of time on this, just trying to get down as much as we could. And then building inspector supplies, I actually took 4.3.1 out of that, only because I own another business and I have electronic, and I told him that he can use that. It's just convenient for me, so I says, you don't have to buy any books, I already have them. They're on my computer. I pay for it for other things, so why wouldn't I let you guys do it too? Don't let Upcodes know that I'm not supposed to use it commercially. They're not watching. Plumber inspector, okay, we do have a change. We have a change in their code too, and he does need to, again, we went from 175 to 250, and it looks like 5%. That is actually needed because they have a major change. We have a change, they have a major change. He needs to do all sorts of trainings and all that. Electrical inspector supplies also went up 1.94%. That's just how it worked. That's $10. It seems like a lot, but the pays are so low because everything's part-time or alternates and all that. So when you say 7 and it's $1,800, it's not a big change. Building inspector other charges. Again, that's our books, our paper, our this, that, and the other thing. There's no change there whatsoever. And in fact, we usually give some of that back. I could have taken some out of there, and I might still. But that's something it is what it is. We didn't use much of it. And that's for our paper, for our pencils, and then gas inspector other, it's level. Kept it at 0. Electrical inspector others, we just kept all this at 0, so this is 0. So in the end, we have a 3.28% which is $5,532, and that's out of 22,000 or 220,000. I thought that was pretty good. But any questions at all?
Mine's more, not specific necessarily to yours, just the 7.92%. I just wanna make sure I understand if it's a COLA increase and a step increase, which is 1.5. Shouldn't it be 3.5%?
Yes, so the collective bargaining agreement that took place this also incorporates longevity stipends as well. So I can't remember how long.
There is a longevity in there, I apologize.
part of
Yeah, I can't remember how long Lynn has worked for, but longevity, I think she's been, how many years?
20 years, I think.
So she gets the highest stipend for the collective bargaining
Which is
agreement.
part of
I
this.
also meant to say that the building official is also the zoning enforcement officer. which keeps me hopping. You got a lot of people, that, and God bless them, hey, you have a chance, you have the I'll listen to it, I'll take every phone call. Austin's heard some of the phone calls, okay, sir, thank you very much. In fact, you arrested me one day. It was just, it's funny. I mean, I just sit there and listen to them and I do the best I can do with that. But any other questions? But,
I'm looking here at your total department, 174.73
Yep.
in expenses, which seems reasonable giving all the things that you do there.
correct.
And the salaries seem to be reasonable for what you do. And then I look at, I think I read in the report that you bring in about 220,000 a year in revenue.
Correct. The rest goes into the general fund, which is a normal thing.
So I think that's a very well-run department.
Thank you very much. And it's gonna get better because we did increase our, it's already been lean and mean. So it's gonna be, we're gonna end up with our increase in our fees. I think we're gonna do even better and hoping to get more into the general fund.
Okay.
Better would be about $2.5 million, if you can get that.
I couldn't hear you. What was that?
Better would be about $2.5 million, if you can stretch that out, we'd love you.
Could it be $100,000 per permit? Figure that out right away.
No, you're doing a great job, we appreciate it,
Yeah.
I
thank you.
appreciate that and thank you very much. And I appreciate the board, last week was it? I really appreciated that, folks. Thank you very much.
One more quick question.
Yeah, of course, you.
Do you find that you, with the other inspectors working, they are part-time,
Yes, they are,
that's adequate for,
actually, I don't think the electrical, he is just over 20 hours, so I don't think he's part-time in it. I misspoke when I said that, I
okay.
apologize.
No, I consider for part-time, 20 hours to me.
Now, you're getting a deal with me, I wanna tell you something funny. I retired from the state, and I have the state insurance, so I don't touch any of your insurance here, and I don't touch any of your retirement. Try my best.
Good.
Okay. I enjoy your conversation, Harry, thank you. Awesome.
But you think that with the staff at the current hours that they work, that's covering all of the needs?
It seems to be working relatively well. Do we have people calling in? I just was told there's an email I missed because I had a doctor's appointment. Then I came back here. I'm gonna go back to my office. I won't charge you anything. I'll just read the email and send it because I'm not gonna be here tomorrow. Lynn always, she's golden. She calls me. I always tell her, if there's something, just give me a call. It's free. But, if I can kind of make things work, however it works, I try my best to do that. Okay, thank you. That's it for a while.
Alrighty. Next is our Board of Health Department. We have a member of the Board of Health here. Can I call you Butch?
Call whatever you want.
Here to present the Board of Health's budget. This is, kind of also incorporated part of our land use department, so we have an overlap in employees. Lynn Miller, who Harold just spoke of, also works in the health department. So Butch, if you wanna.
I'll do my best. I had a little surgery done today, so I'm gonna do the best I can talking. I think for the most part that we are pretty much level funded from the previous year. I think our largest increase was purchase services, and I believe we had an increase in the monitoring of the landfill. And I guess we lost we don't have the CARES funds anymore, so the rest of that increase is for those services. And included in those, I'll try to give you a quick breakdown. The landfill monitoring services is 7,410. The sharps disposal is 2,160. Nursing services for the communicable disease is, I just lost it. Sorry about that.
It only went up $140, we're beating them up for $140, There's having something going on.
I just lost it on my phone.
But you good,
Makes sense to me.
Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, that's,
it's $140.
yeah, that's the biggest thing that we had an increase on.
You'll notice a big increase, obviously, so in FY '25, we had the big increase as Butch mentioned, a lot of our expenses were covered either by CARES or ARPA. So in the FY twenty-five budget, we told the health department they'll have to start covering those expenses moving forward from twenty-five to twenty-six. So pretty much level funded there, and then Wynn's
Minor increase.
contractual increase for the CBA there.
That was 2.5%, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
I have a related question. We had a survey out about townwide single service rubbish. Is that gone anywhere?
Yeah, so we've been working actually pretty closely with the Board of Health on that, so there's a lot, believe it or not, trash is, I didn't realize how complicated trash is, but
It's crazy.
yeah, so we worked with the Board of Health to update their hauler rules and regulations, which they adopted several months ago. That was one of the first steps that we needed to be able to present to the haulers. We're actually working with town council now on finalizing a request for proposals to be put on the streets. One, to get some price solicitations, but still, it's gonna be, typically it takes about 18 months to implement, from signing contract to, the trash truck is picking up your trash. So we've gotta still implement our staffing plan. The haulers have to talk about if they need to acquire any trucks to service Rutland and the potentially two other communities regional. So we're slowly but surely working on it, but that's the latest update.
That's perfect, thank you very much.
And I know it's been a goal, especially of the Board of Health, for a long time now.
Yeah.
Question. I noticed the Board of Health rabies control went from like $500 to $1,200. Do we really have a problem with rabies in this area, or do you charge for rabies, or what?
A lot of it is the increase in cost, just like with any type of monitoring, the lab work is increasing on us. That's one of the biggest costs on it.
And we pay for the lab work?
Yes, it's
That's
part of the
done.
fee, I believe in it, yes.
And
Yeah.
do we collect anything from the individual or family that we're testing? No?
No, we don't, no.
Okay.
Any other questions for Butch?
Thanks, Butch.
Thank you, nice job. Alright, next is our Planning and Community Development Department, led by Town Planner, John Charbonneau. You can find his budget on page 31 of your budget.
Good evening. In the planning department, the functions we serve is we conduct the day-to-day operations of the planning board, which means we take in applications, we deal with applicants pre-application and guide them through the application permitting process. We make sure the applications are complete and filed correctly. We work on long-range things such as zoning bylaw amendments. We have a couple coming up at this Springtown meeting regarding accessory dwelling units and also battery energy storage. We also deal with economic development and try and promote and work with the EDC in terms of trying to promote business and bring as much business to town. We also look at the actual zoning districts to see if there are any changes to be made. One thing that I'd like to work on soon is I've been talking to Tamika about doing a survey about Route 68 to see what the appetite for the town would be to change the zoning on Route 68 to encourage mixed use or business development there to help promote economic development. So we're always working on day-to-day things, mid-range things, and also long-range aspects of planning simultaneously as much as possible. The budget is very simple. Basically, the top personal services is a combination of my salary and also the stipends for the planning board combined. The only increase there is naturally cost of living plus 1.5 step. So that's the increase you see there. The other one you see, purchase of services, that is the assessment that the town pays to be a member of the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission every year. Other than that, you have some minor expenses that are related to, expense line items that are related to the Conservation Commission, which I don't handle or deal with, I don't staff the Conservation Commission. Any expenses incurred by the planning board as far as office supplies and other things comes out of the planning board revolving fund.
What are the conservation items for, and should they be coming out of their revolving fund? They do have a revolving fund, right, conservation?
They do, yeah, so there's some limitations on what you can use the Wetlands Protection Act funds. Tamika she pays a lot of those bills and serves, as a staff liaison to the Concom. She could, I think, assist with some of the things that are typically paid out of the general fund. As you can see, over the past few years, there's been little or no activity at all. I just, didn't feel it was appropriate to cut the general fund allocation for the Concom. But I think, Tamika, you can speak to what typically is paid out of the Wetlands Act fund.
Yeah, so the only expenses that can come from the WPA are for promulgation of the Wetlands Protection Act. So if for some reason there was ever an expense, something that we had to purchase that was not directly related to that, this gives us kind of a backup plan to have some sort of funding option. Fortunately, historically, we've not really had that come up. But a good example is we're actually planning on using it in the next couple of weeks to have a local author come and do a book reading as part of a program that the Conservation Commission is running this spring. But because that does not have to do with enforcement of the Wetlands Protection Act, we're gonna take that from the general fund.
So it's a little bit, kind of like a fail-safe for.
It's not much, as you can see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John?
I do have a curious question though. John, you apparently recommended, or it was the normal increase in your salary, so for fiscal '26, you went from 91,800 to 93,636. The TA recommended higher.
Yeah, so,
Not that I'm against that, I'm just curious why.
so John, in his initial budget recommendation, forgot to include the, step increase due to performance evaluation.
Yeah.
So, in my budget, I included the 1.5%.
Yeah, I just did the 2%, I didn't realize the other part of it.
You're entitled.
I just found that out today, about an hour ago, so.
Okay, thank you.
How do we? Yes, sir.
Can we justify, I don't think it's, why did they go up on their, I'm gonna stop, cause I'm gonna get in trouble.
CMRPC?
I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, obviously, we don't control that,
Not a problem, that's it, you guys. Once again, you guys do a great job, and I'm thankful that you're at least thinking and looking into Route 68 as a corridor for that, that's a great idea. Been trying to do that for years, and hopefully if you cast out the rod, you can catch something out there. and
Yeah,
it
we'll see what
works out
people
well.
have the appetite for through the survey and that. I can bring that to the planning board and the bylaw subcommittee to kind of spur them to do something hopefully.
Good job, thank you.
Any other questions for John? All right, thank you, John, appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Next is the Rutland Public Library. Budget can be found on page 34 of your budget book, led by Director Carrie Remington.
Hi, everybody. So you can see we had some increases. Salary, a raise, increase, cost of living increase for the director, for the assistant director, and for the children's librarian. And I increased the library aid line because I could use more help. Financial help. We use our state aid that generally balances out what lacks we have, which is averaged probably close to more than $10,000 annually. So it doesn't even really completely cover it, but I thought I'd push it up there anyway. Purchase services remain the same. The supply line remained the same. And the fluctuation with the other charges is our book budget, and our book budget is based on the total of the previous 3 lines: salaries, purchase services, supplies, and then we have to multiply that by 0.234579. I know, but that's how you get 19%. Of course, good news is, once we get to 10,000 people, we can decrease that 19% to 16%, but then, of course, it's a whole new ballgame. So we comply right now with the Board of Library Commissioners with a population of 10,000. We're open 40 hours, we're open 5 days a week, so we're already there, we don't have to make any changes. Any questions? Okay.
Just really quick, for the aides wages increase, are you adding additional aides or is that just increase in hours?
I'm just increasing the income from the town to support the necessity of my library aides. I'm not
So
adding
no-
to my staff,
No hours increase or anything?
no
Just-
hours increase,
Just salary increase?
yes.
Above?
As I said, the town has yet to support the library aid budget. I utilize state aid, which we receive when we maintain compliance with the state. And those funds I can use discretionarily. So generally I use that for staffing. We're gonna use probably $5,000, maybe $6,000 to pay for a furnace that was problematic and there were no money in the maintenance budget. So we utilize those funds that the state gives us and I can use them at my discretion with the support of my board to balance out our budget. But I'm just trying to bring the library aid line up to where it is more realistic for what my needs are here. The needs are for the community, not my needs personally.
So that would be used for more than just paying staff, that's,
No, it's just for paying staff.
okay.
That line runs short. I think I'm out of that money now. March. So for the next 3 months, April, May, June, I will be utilizing state aid funds to pay my library aides. Yes, Harry?
What do you normally use your state aid funds for?
To pay my library aides, buy books, and pay any excess bills that my budget does not cover.
Can you also can I just put to follow up on that?
Yeah.
What's another common use, I think, maybe for some other libraries that have that grant that they could use for like, programs, initiatives, things like that?
Yes, they do a lot of programming, there's discretionary funds for doing programs. We're collaborating with the Conservation Commission to do the story time. So they're gonna come here on a Sunday, probably afternoon, I think, do a Zoom meeting with the author, talk about the book, and I think there'll be a few little activities. I've got a staff member who's interested in doing a little salamander thing. So I think that's, those are the kinds of things, programming, having events, having speakers come in, having performers come in, those are the kinds of things libraries typically would use those funds for, which we have used them for, but primarily it is for salaries and cleaning up any excess costs that haven't been covered by our budget.
The reason this is the TA recommended 28, you're looking for 30. So if the town gives you 30, then you don't have to take your state funds to help with the aids because you have enough money and you can use the state funds for other stuff.
That would be correct,
Is that what I'm
Harry.
hearing?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay.
Did you mention how much the state fund is?
I wish Donna was here, but I
I'm
believe.
here.
Oh, Donna's here. Donna can give us that information.
Is it in the front or is it something that we don't control?
You don't,
We don't control.
you don't control it. It's library funds only.
Perfect.
So currently, they're giving it in two disbursements. So currently, our first disbursement in 25 was 13,600. Last year, we received 29,450.
So last
Just under
year,
30,000 basically, between 25 and 30,000 a year.
okay.
Is that a use it or you lose it kind of thing, or is it?
No, I don't have to use it all, but I generally do, I think, don't I, Donna?
No, so on June 30th, last year, June 30th, 2024, there was $20,600 remaining at year end.
She's gonna spend it now, Donna.
But however, the year before, we ended at 13,000, so each year does fluctuate as to what the fund balance is at year end, so.
But it carries over from year.
It does carry over, yes.
And that's the grant money.
That's the
Yes.
grant money,
Okay.
yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Earlier, I mentioned that you had reached out about having someone
Oh.
attend.
Oh, yes, we're
Monday.
working on a long-range plan, a strategic plan, a 5-year plan, and I'm looking for someone from finance.
I'm gonna come in the morning and Lynn will come in the evening.
Perfect, thank you so much, I appreciate that, thank you
Any more
guys.
specifics on what you're looking for then, or is it just
I'll
a
send
general?
you, I believe that what I'll do is I'll send the Barbara, the woman who's helping us with this focus group, I'll send her the information, and I will also include you two with the information that Barbara sent me previously, okay? Thank you so much. Thanks, have a great night.
Nice job, thank you. Thank you. All right, next is our senior center, so it's Council on Aging, led by Director Nancy Nichols. You can find her budget on page 35 of the budget book.
Cheers.
I'm sorry, are we presenting or waiting for questions?
If you could just talk through your budget, some of the high-level changes, and then we go to questions.
Okay, I guess the biggest change you're gonna see on this budget is the fact that my salary went up just to bring me more equitable, which I've been kind of requesting for about the last 4 or 5 years. I think I was the only director still at an MTP3 level, which is that old grid that we used, our old table. And the OAG side was brought up, and we were told the MTP schedule would be brought up, and so it's been going on for years, so that's the biggest difference you're gonna see there. Purchase services just up a little bit for, increase in costs, same with supplies. And the other charges are Mass Council on Aging dues, which is an organization that we belong to. There's Mass Council on Aging, and then there's the National Council on Aging, but the Mass Council on Aging gives us a lot of benefits, programs, like you wanna belong to that or you're kind of not in the loop. But the membership in the recent years has gone up a little bit, so I just account for an adjustment that may come through. Simple budget.
Questions for Nancy?
The outreach coordinator salary, looks like it's remained pretty much the same, going up a little bit every year. Does she need more? Do you need to use her more? Could she be used more?
In a perfect world, we'd have probably full-time outreach, maybe a couple of outreach, somebody to do programming, but we've never had that, so. And I wouldn't say that's part of the reason why I requested my salary, is because that one went up substantially, like that particular salary started higher than I probably would have started, but it was with a different town administrator and they used to just kind of pop you in at a level and not necessarily put you at a step one. So it was substantially higher than the previous coordinator. And then it did go up every year, like the increase has been more than had gotten 10 years in 3 years. So, cause I kinda hovered right around that same, maybe $1 more for years. As far as more, could we use people? Yeah, we could always use people, but we
More
also are
hours.
used to just kinda working with what we have.
How many hours does she work?
16.
16?
I have a question. Nancy, for this $111,213 that the TA recommended, how many people do you guys serve?
Do we serve?
How many people you guys see on a weekly basis?
We see
daily?
between probably 30 to 50 a day, depending on what's going on. And that's on the people who just need assistance, like referral assistance, classes,
How about food?
presentation activities, food. Well, we send out probably an average of 30 meals a day to
Okay.
homebound.
And then coming in, depending on what the meal is, if there's an event, we might have 6 people eating, we might have 60 people eating. Right now, we have no one eating because the kitchen has damage that we're waiting for. But, yeah,
Who delivers those meals?
Elder Services delivers them.
They do it. We don't have, none of the individuals in the town deliver them.
Well, there are volunteers, but they are, again, they are either volunteer completely or they're paid a small stipend by Elder Services. And then there's a kitchen site manager that is also provided by Elder Services and paid benefits, salary, et cetera, for 20 hours a week.
So Rutland is roughly 60% population that qualifies for this?
Oh, no, the amount of population is just, it's about 23%
Okay.
of the population are qualified for services.
Okay, I was going the wrong way.
And that's
Okay.
regular services, okay, so 60 and above. But then you have people, anybody disabled, 20, above the age of 22, will also qualify for certain services. Like they can get Meals on Wheels, they can come to any activities that they want, but they needed like a home health aide, they'll use they're not provided that by Elder Services, they have to use a different agency.
It's confusing the 60 with the age versus the 20. But so you're saying 22% of the people in the town of Rutland are eligible to receive some sort of services. Okay.
Whatever, and as much as they want, through our council, and they can go to other council on agings too.
Okay.
In other towns, and a lot of times we see that, we get people from other towns and our people go, cause we don't have the exact same activities.
And what's up, and you mentioned something up with the kitchen, what's going on?
Oh, there was a pipe that burst,
Okay.
so there was some damage where we didn't need to be.
Okay. When do you expect it back online so we can help these 22%?
The kitchen, it's a little
Hopefully
bit slow,
soon.
hopefully by the end of March. The floor should be here, as soon as that goes back in, it'll be put back together, ready for use. There's a cabinet, a large cabinet that holds the sink, they just put the old one back in temporarily. When that one comes in, it's back ordered. They'll come and put that, and hopefully that'll only put the kitchen out of commission for a day or so.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know the history, can you explain to me the salary piece again, why such a large increase?
Just to make it, to bring mine up to be equitable to other directors, and it still would be much lower, to be honest. It's just been very, very low for years.
So, and I can speak to that a little bit. Nancy and I had a conversation when I first started. There was a discussion about replacement along the wage scale. At the time, we didn't have a formal mechanism to reclassify employees. The select board since then has approved personnel policies to provide for that procedure. We've had a couple of employees take advantage of that. Nancy was one of them, asked for a reclassification. I can't remember at the top of my head what exactly you requested. I know it was along the MTP 5 range, maybe higher along the steps. We placed her at MTP 5 step 1. And exactly as she mentioned, and this was a unanimous decision from me, recommendation from our former HR director, Ally, and also a discussion with Donna as well. I do agree that the salary for the position was not appropriate in comparison to similar department heads. Similar department heads include but not limited to our library director, which is also placed at MTP 5, our recreation and safe place directors, and as well as some deputy directors for our public safety departments as well. So from a department head's position, it was my decision ultimately to approve the reclassification to MTP 5.
I'm good.
Yeah, this is center serve 60 and older or 65 and older?
60 plus.
60 plus? I was just looking at the census information and because it says person 65 and over for Rutland, the percent is 12.9%. So that's from the census.gov site. That's 65.
That's also an average.
Yeah,
A
I mean,
10-year
these,
average.
the figures I'm giving you is what Anita gave me after 2026.
Any questions for Nancy?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you,
Thank
appreciate it. So next would be Veteran Services. We're a little bit early from when we told the director or agent, Veterans Agent Karen Greenwood to come. If she doesn't end up making it, I'd be happy to go back to it, but if the committee and board are okay, I'll move on to the town administrator's budget. Just wanna give her time to come. So, town administrator's budget can be found on page 22 of the budget book. This also includes the select board budget. So very similar to other town departments, virtually no changes. Actually, the budget has a net reduction of just under 2.5%. On the personal services side, in FY '25, we reallocated hours associated for Tamika, the executive assistant's position. Tamika was paid from a million different line items, to be candid. That didn't make sense to me, and also just from a payroll perspective. So in FY '25, we shifted Tamika to be paid 100% 40 hours from the town administration budget. And the increase associated in FY '26 is the wage increase for the COLA and the step increase from our successful performance review. Did not budget any increase for the town administrator salary. Very similar to previous years, I've not had a performance review with the select board yet, so didn't feel it was appropriate to budget an increase there yet.
Why is that? Did you
We did it
address
last
in
year. We did it last year. Again, I have a contract that says that I need to have a performance review. I just felt it was inappropriate to put an increase, assuming that I have a successful performance review. The board last year ultimately did provide a cost of living adjustment similar to the other town employees. So I went from the salary of 126 to 128.5. But I'll leave that up to the board to determine what my compensation is.
Someone from the board wanna say when we're gonna have an evaluation for the said town administrator?
Last year we did it around his 1-year anniversary. Anniversary date is middle of April, I believe. The hope was this year we would do it similar in March, beginning of April, but we can't even make a decision about the budget right now, so our goals, our board goals and objectives and the town administrator goals and objectives have kind of been put on hold until we figure out the budget.
Well, I'm gonna say something from the finance committee. We got a guy that's doing a great job and you guys slow walking it. I'm a little upset that everybody around here doesn't think he's doing a good job, besides me. And slow walking his salary should not be slow walked every year, and he doesn't wanna say it because he's too proud, but I'll say it. You guys gotta get going. Put on your, let's go. If he leaves, we're in big trouble again. We're gonna go through the whole process all over again. And slow walking his salary every year is not fair to him or doing the town any justice. That's my 2 cents.
Second.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe his contract calls for a guaranteed increase every year.
Why isn't it in there then?
It should be in the budget.
It should be in the
It's-
budget, yes.
But, yeah, well, to be honest, with all due respect, I didn't feel that was appropriate. It said I shall receive the same cost of living adjustment, but it also says that I have to have a performance review. I also felt it was inappropriate to assume that I have a successful performance review. I'll leave that up to the board to determine my compensation.
Just, I guess as far as consistency, then that should be the case for every single COLA and salary increase, because they're all based on our new personnel policies contingent on positive performance evaluations, so we can't, to me, we're budgeting as if it will happen. The performance reviews will take place, and if they're not eligible because of whatever reason, then that doesn't get paid out, but it should still be accounted for in a line item, that it would be there.
Yeah.
Regardless, and that needs to be across the board for all
Yeah.
cases like that.
So
in
I
my
think that's duly noted for future budgets. I did the same thing last year. And, the board did decide to provide me a cost of living adjustment. But I think that's a discussion that can happen between me and the board for what my compensation is. For the rest of the town administration budget, and I see Karen Greenwood has showed up, so Karen, we'll get to you next, okay? So for purchase services, the town administrator and select board budget oftentimes ends up being a catch-all for a lot of other department spending. We end up paying, for example, for professional development for other town staff, other costs for other town staff. We also pay for the other town report, the annual town report. We level funded all of those expenses with exception to the town administrator purchase services. At the fall town meeting, we increased that $10,000. I think that was a little higher, so I've reduced that by $5,000 for the purchase services. Legal, we also level funded. We use our legal services, but I think that $45,000 should be an appropriate number for next year. With the supplies and other charges and expenses, again, very similar. We end up being a catch-all, paying for paper, pens, everything else for other departments as well, and those are paid out of those line items. Overall, reduction of, as I mentioned, just about $6,800 or 2.5% over our current fiscal year budget.
Not that I'm against having catch-alls, but it doesn't give a true representation to what the department costs, right? The other departments, not necessarily town administrators, so I just wanna be conscientious of that fact and be careful with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's some work to do, I think, on how we classify our budgets. You see a lot of budgets that have overarching categories of purchase services. In my experience, I've seen some other budgets that have a lot more detail about what goes on in those, like quite literally separate line items. It's not how we have it set up here. It's not to say that we can't change that in the future. It's gonna take a little bit more work to really spell that out.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about the undistributed expenses too being distributed. Cause really, again, we're not representing what each individual department actually costs the town. Which, does matter. I mean, if somebody you just brought up the council on aging is $100,000 and whatever $1,000, but it's not really. Cause the undistributed costs allocate to that department, so it's more like 130,000, 140,000 depending on what benefits and all that jazz. So it's just worth understanding that this is a little bit off on some of those things.
Yeah, no, and so I don't disagree, especially on the undistributed expenses. It's definitely not an uncommon thing for municipal budgets to have a whatever we wanna call it, fixed cost, undistributed expenses. Essentially our benefits budget. I don't disagree that I think we could end up having a separate line item for each department. I think it will take a little bit more maybe work on our end just to make sure that all of those are appropriate.
You could even do that offline.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be as part of the budget, but you could do an offline analysis to kind of give the town an understanding of what the actual departmental expenses are.
Yep. I
Which
agree.
means it doesn't have to be exact as well.
I agree. Any other questions for this budget?
Also,
Right.
a quick,
Yeah.
sorry, I know we've talked about this and it's not in this budget partially because we were doing kind of a level funded / level services budget, but for future, I would still like to see that, as we've talked about the salary adjustment line item, so that when we are going into collective bargaining and for all of these, performance-based increases, that there's a allocation there that is a little bit more blurry, especially on the for the CBA side, but also just for other staff and everything as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great, and just for the rest of the group, some communities have a separate line item. Typically, it's classified as compensation reserve. So that ends up being essentially our budget for potential increases, especially as we're going into bargaining with potential with our unions. So we don't have that, the challenge there is how much, right? Some communities put a lot of money in and they don't use it all, but they have it just to have that as a backup for their bargaining. We've never done that here. I don't think it's a bad idea, it's just we gotta justify adding more expenses to our budget to be able to do that, right? So something for future discussion.
Is there any collective bargaining that we have to do this year? for next year?
Yeah, so FY twenty-six will include it's the final contract year for our DPW and our dispatchers. So DPW for this budget, we'll talk about that tomorrow, but in FY twenty-six, the current bargaining agreement for FY twenty-six has a pretty substantial step shift increase for DPW. I don't wanna get into the detail, but we'll keep that in mind as we go into our next negotiations with our DPW folks. So they got a pretty good shift this year for '26 coming up.
Well, we bargained with them and we gave it to them,
Yep.
so it's, they earned it.
Yeah, and it was agreed to by I think previous DPW director and our previous town administrator bargained that, and it was approved by the select board at the time.
I'm good.
All right, Karen, we'll go to you now if you want. I'm gonna introduce Karen Greenwood, our veteran service agent. Her budget can be found on page 36. Karen, I can open this for you if you want.
At least 2/3.
So if you could just quickly just roll through.
What am I supposed to be?
Yeah, so you just quickly could roll through just high level what your budget's gonna cover for next year.
Salary. That's kind of like explained there. The veteran service supplies, the reason it was larger last fiscal year is I had the money in there to pay for the new honor roll plaque that was put up there for the Persian Gulf veterans, so there's no plan to do another one. And the cost, when you add a name, if you've gone up there, you've seen we did add some names after the original plaque. If it comes up, it might be covered in there, but I haven't heard from anybody. That was under the supplies, and the services, primarily what Veteran Services does is Chapter 115 benefits, which is a state program for those veterans who have little or no income. It's based on their income. And we haven't had any cases in a few years. Rutland's a small community. The population, the income of most people is just higher than the norm. A lot of you know I did this job as a veterans agent in the city of Worcester prior to retiring for 20 years. And I mean, I have no cases in Rutland, but when I was in Worcester, I had 300 cases. So, you know, it's the economics. So that's why I, suggested it be reduced, because we haven't had any cases. I did have one last year, but unfortunately the gentleman passed away. I don't know what's gonna happen with the budget with the country, and you hear all the stories about cutting veterans' benefits and people losing their jobs. It might have an effect. So I would hope if something does happen, that we start getting cases of people who need the assistance, that I could come back to the finance board, the selectmen, to increase the money. Because any money that's spent on these veterans' benefits, it's a monthly stipend. We help pay for medical, help pay for fuel. It's not a lot of money. You gotta have under, let's say, 2,500 income a month. And the benefits that are expended are reimbursed by the state of 75%. So it's kind of a given. If I have to come back for $5,000 to help a veteran out, you're gonna get 75% of that on next year's cherry sheet. The other monies that are in the budget are for the flags. As a veterans agent, we purchase all the flags for the graves at all the cemeteries. That too is reimbursed from the state, 75%. I think that's it in a nutshell. If I was in front of the city council in the city of Worcester, I'd be saying a lot more, but I think for the most part, everybody here understands what the program's about. Any questions? The fact I reduced the budget really shouldn't have any questions from anybody, but
just more on operational, do you rely on people reaching out to you? Is there a state, I remember some of the conversation with the honor roll, is there a state listed? Does the state update you, if there's veterans that have moved into town or may be eligible services?
They used to, they stopped that about a year or so ago, but I heard a rumor they might be notifying the veterans agents again. They used to send a list and the privacy thing came up, and then military records in Milford didn't want to do it, so. I mean, I'm not that active enough to see, but I know I don't get the list anymore. The honor roll, just as an example, like you said, somebody moved into town, but if they weren't from Rutland with their home or record to begin with, they're not going on the honor roll just because they moved to Rutland. Doesn't mean they get put on the list.
Veteran Services is any resident, though, that is current resident in Rutland, it's not their home of service, correct?
Right, current
To receive
residents,
services.
every city and town in the state of Massachusetts has a veterans agent. This program we administer here in the state is one of a kind. No other state in the United States does this program. I mean, the VA is out all around, you know about. But this program, Chapter 115, in addition, the state comes up with the money if you're a 100% disabled veteran. You get the bonus, it was just increased to $2,500 twice a year. You get the discounts. You're familiar if you know the budgets with the assessor's office and stuff. They give abatements depending anywhere from 10% on up. The veterans plates, you know, all these other benefits. A lot of them are the state benefits, but my office, a lot of times the personal will come to me first, and I'm always referring people to the actual department they need to be with.
Karen, veterans plates are given by the state?
Yeah, the RMV.
Okay.
You go through the registry
You
of
don't
motor
pay for them, they give them to you for free?
No, you pay for them.
Okay.
I think I paid 70. I think.
I think that they're considered like the charity or vanity plates or something. I
Vanity
think.
plates, yes. It's 80 now, okay.
Thank you, Karen. So right now you're relying on essentially the veterans to reach out to you
Right, if you
directly.
look on the website for Veteran Services, I don't have an office. I can't see giving my cell phone out on the town's website, so they go through the town administrator, and immediately Tamika or Austin will email me through the Outlook, and then I reach out to the person
So we
that way.
actually have a form right on the website, so if somebody's looking to reach Karen, when they fill out the form, it automatically sends to Karen and to Austin and myself. And then sometimes, so the phone number on that page is our office, so if I get a call from somebody, I take their information and then I give it to Karen versus giving out her personal cell phone number, and then she contacts them directly.
And my office will be, my office, me, not the office, will be at that community fair. So I'll have a little table there like I did last year, handing out brochures or just flyers. But a lot of what I do is a lot of it's referral, because I don't have any veterans now in Chapter 115 benefits.
Thank you.
You good? Nice job. Thank you, appreciate it. Alrighty, moving on, page 24 of your budget book is, I spelled my. Not that there a while ago. Alright. Led by, cable director Paul Mattson, community television budget. This is an interesting budget, while it's within the general fund. It is also part of a PEG access revolving fund, so revenues that come in from your Charter Spectrum bill, a certain percentage of that goes towards the town to provide for cable services. The budget is level funded. Paul, if you just wanna talk about what the budget for our current year and next year will provide.
Okay, right now we are looking at essentially a 2% increase on all of the pages of the budget for the next year or two. I don't know. I had it, I missed it.
Yeah, if you come back to that on page 24.
Yeah. There it is, I got it. Okay, so basically, the areas of the budget that have increased about 2%. We, at this particular point in time, things are relatively quiet. I have some concerns about the eventual changeover from version 10 to version 11 of your DOS supervisors. And our servers are now on 10, and so when it becomes 11 next year, I have yet to be able to find out just exactly how this is going to affect us. Whether I will have to get all new servers, or whether the service will continue the way it is, based upon some changes or whatever. I do not know. That is one of the big questions that I have right now. And so otherwise than that, you know, the staff is starting to build now, and so, okay, things are starting to get squared away in that respect, and so, okay, so we are just looking at, you know, a real simple, budget, and, you know, a 2% increase is probably just gonna hold on right now unless, you know, unless I find out something about, version 10 and version 11 that's gonna rattle us a pretty good, I can imagine, but I just hope that we don't have to get new servers, because that will be a big project. But at any rate, worry about it when it happens.
So what about the closed caption? Didn't we talk about that last year and the year before, that that's a requirement now?
Yes, so the good thing about the contract that we signed for closed caption is actually the payment that you see in FY '24 actually is a multi-year agreement, so that actually covers 3 years. So we'll still have one more year out of the 5,800 for closed caption, and then you can expect a line item, an increase on that line item probably next year to cover for another multi-year.
Yes. Yes. Closed caption is, we've had a few comments on it that, you know, people are appreciating this and so on and so forth, so, you know, when you sit there and you watch a meeting, sometimes you think somebody is mumbling, and you can look at the closed captioning and say, that's what they said? Never mind. Anyways, but those are the types of things that we've come across, and so it's just one of these things that, okay, you know, some of the things that we have come down with that really had benefits, and, you know, at this particular point in time, things seem to be running fairly smoothly as far as what we're hearing from people in town and so on and so forth. So, you know, we have our own select service, and then we also have YouTube, so, you know, you have options of finding a program out there, and it seems to be working very well for now, so hopefully without any great amount of issues or problems, it will continue that way, and we haven't really had anything come down lately that's been of any consequence or anything else. And so, you know, we belong to a group called Mass Access, which is a group of cable television organizations within Worcester County, basically. And so right now, they're just coming up and saying, okay, you know, this is what we wanna look at for the next 4 or 5 years, so, okay, so there's gonna have to be a couple of meetings on that, and I usually go to those anyways, but I attend those, and it's basically at my own expense. I don't worry about getting, you know, a couple of times when I've had to travel a distance, I've filed for mileage, but that's it.
Paul?
Mm-hmm.
Under television wages, how many individuals work under the wages? How many are there?
Right now, if you include me, there's 3.
3?
It's not true, we just added Thaddeus now.
Right, we just added one more, so there will be a 4th, but looking at those figures, that includes 3.
And this is a separate entity unto itself for the most part?
Somewhat, it was set up as a department, I think with Margaret several years ago.
Yeah.
But the way it works is, so we make an appropriation, so for example, current fiscal year 25, $160,000. If at the end of the year, Paul only spends $140,000, that will only pull 140 from the revolving fund. The fund balance will remain, right? That's how
That
that
is
works?
correct, and
It goes back.
it's not it's, the state requires this particular, special revenue fund to not spend directly from it. They just, this particular one is, it's kind of like a receipts reserved for appropriation, meaning you have to appropriate from it, you can't spend from it, so, we transfer from that fund, so we kind of transfer cash from one bank account to another bank account to pay the bills during the year, and then if we don't spend 160, we put it back. So it doesn't,
It's not a rollover.
it's not, we cannot charge expenses directly to it, unfortunately.
Exactly.
But it
Right.
does accrue fund balance, right? So we've
Yeah.
got, I can't remember off the top of my head what it is now, but I think it's about 150-ish thousand that's in the fund balance, assuming that Paul spends all of his 160,000 for this year. And then we'll replenish it, I can't remember when those payments come in, of approximately 80 somewhat thousand dollars, of PEG revenues that come in. I don't know if that's
They
accurate.
typically come in February or March, so yeah, I don't think we've
So soon.
received it
Yeah,
yet
it's-
this year.
It's due here somewhere along the way, not too far down the road, I would imagine, but.
And that is that a 1% franchise fee now, Paul, currently?
No, 3%.
No, we don't get 3 now.
Yeah, we do.
You just, I think, proposed to increase it to 3, I think, with.
We're gonna increase it to 5.
Oh, good, I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
The good news, what I'm trying to say is
Don't
we'll get more
confuse
money
me,
in
I'm
future
old.
years, I'm sorry, Paul. The community, what's your committee called? Cable Advisory Committee.
Yep.
Is in the process of negotiating with Charter Spectrum for a new 10-year franchise agreement with Spectrum. One of the things that is a part of that agreement is that franchise fee, the money that is taken out of your Charter Spectrum bill. It seems they've agreed in principle to increase that fee from 3 to 5%. I apologize, Paul. So it's good.
From 3 to 5% of the, whatever they get paid?
Total income to Spectrum from the town of Rutland.
Okay.
So you see that on your bill, if you subscribe
I don't get
to
it.
cable, yeah, you'll see a franchise fee line item on
You
your
get that
Charter
bonus
Spectrum
water
bill.
bill that I don't get.
So that comes to Rutland.
Yes, and it's only the cable, it does not include the, the internet service either,
That's the bill.
okay?
Internet.
Federal regulations won't allow us to touch the, internet services.
It's water.
So that 5% is in the
An antenna on
contract,
my
that's what
house.
we're looking to negotiate to 5?
That's what we're looking to, yeah, we're still working on finalizing that contract, but.
So Paul, when you talk with them over the last couple of years, what has been their value that they brought in from money that you base your 5% on? Has it gone down or up? Because a lot of people are switching. That's why I'm curious.
Last year it went up. The previous 3 years to that, it went down.
Okay.
Okay, now last year was a very pleasant surprise, actually, because I was not expecting to see the, it has, like I say, had been going down, maybe 1 or 2% or something like that on the total. But, okay, so there's a lot of new houses in town, so, okay, so these people have taken on Spectrum cable systems, all right? So now that they are there, all right, they're paying a bill every month, and this goes into
Good, sure.
the additional fund that we get kicked back is a terrible word, but that's what it boils down to.
I mean, I'm looking at 160, and if we keep that 160 coming in, that's great. But if their services have gone down even at 5%, we don't make this 160, that could be an issue going forward.
Yeah, no, and that's something that's been brought up, Peter Crane, previous studio manager, when we were developing the FY 25 budget last year, meeting with Paul and Peter, one of the requests and comments that came from Peter was at some point to maintain this level of services based off of cord cutters, declining subscribers for Charter Spectrum. I think it's their position that at some point, if we'd like to continue these services, the town will have to provide some sort of support there. There is some legislation, that comes up every year. I know Mass Access, does a lot of, advocacy, to have a similar subscriber franchise fee for, your streaming subscriptions. Like YouTube TV, things like that, Hulu TV. That's not in place yet, but that's something hopefully that will come, recognizing that it's having an impact on, municipal public access, programming, so.
Okay.
Yep.
So, all those things that we just said, were answering what my question was going to be, or is still part of it. The 160 we get, that comes out of this separate reserve for appropriation account.
MGL 45 W2 something.
So that was what you partially just said, Austin, was, 2 or 3, cause I kinda ask the same question every year, but 2 or 3 years ago, that's what was said, was you were concerned about the revenues not coming in. We had enough back then and the budget was framed around it, et cetera, et cetera. But you were concerned that possibly in a year or two, that would drop below what this budget was at each year. But you just said it went up a little bit a year ago or whatever.
Last year was to me, a very pleasant surprise. Yes, it did go up.
Okay, so it went up. So I guess is there any, well, you're gonna negotiate for a higher percentage, so that's a plus. So right at this moment, you don't have any vision of that possibly being less money available to us than what this budget is?
Right now, no.
Yeah, so Tom, just
I don't know.
It's
your fault, dude. Ain't mine.
It wasn't me.
Dude.
Oh.
Is there a calculator, Tom?
No.
This is the calculator.
Sorry.
Stop dialing it.
No. Tom, to answer your question, I think based off of if we get the same amount of funds, which hopefully we'll get a little bit more, it's looking like if we were to maintain this level of spending, we'll probably have about one more year based off of where I think the fund balance will be and where new revenues will come in. That's also assuming that we've got still $64,000 in capital outlay, right? We could also probably trim that to reduce the spending overall long term. But this is quite. I think previous year's budget was like $250,000. That was a big expense year. I think 2 years ago, Paul. You did a lot of capital upgrades, I know.
Yeah, there was a lot of equipment bought in that one,
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you see here was purchased a couple of years ago, so.
But see, my concern too, that's why I said I've been asking this each year, is the same thing Harry just said.
Yeah.
The subscribers to cable have been dropping, so a percentage of a number that's going down is obviously gonna be less, right?
There was a downtrend for about 3 years successfully, okay? And last year it went up, and I assume that is the fact that there was more housing taking place in Rutland, and these people decided, okay, we'll have spectrum for our cable systems, okay? So, I'm not saying that it's gonna change again, because there's all kinds of other things out there now that people can choose from. And so, at this point in time, I'm waiting to see what happens with this year's stipend, okay? Above and beyond that, that will probably tell me something. Not only that, but, my in-house spies at Spectrum will probably give me a little bit of information too, but at this particular point in time, they're not saying anything, so.
And the reason I ask is a friend of mine just switched from Spectrum to Hulu or Apple or one of those.
Yeah.
Well, we don't get any money from that.
No.
Not yet.
So as that continues, that's why I'm asking what it's like.
Well, that's up to Uncle, okay?
Right.
If they wanna do something like that relative to towns and cities within the continental US, that would be something that they would be required to do.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment about the budget? For the wages piece, it would be helpful if, for transparency, if we could see kind of the different staffs, cause I think the other budgets have the director's salary and then support staff, or I think before we had a studio manager. And if, you know, for transparency, I realize that it's PEG money, but just in consistency and continuity with the other budgets also.
Yep, good.
Thank you.
Really quick.
Yep.
If we have to do anything with server upgrades, new servers, is that also covered within the PEG funds, or is that separate?
Oh, yeah, it will be.
It would be,
Oh,
okay.
To
yeah.
the capital
Oh, yeah.
outlay line up, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I have no feel for how that's gonna go yet, and nobody's saying yes, no, or boo. But I'm sure somebody knows somewhere, but it's just not any open information yet.
Alright.
But they could come back in their negotiations too and say, no, we can't do even the 3, we wanna go down to 2%. Right? They could.
Don't put that on the
Yeah,
table, Tom.
Essentially, we could.
No, I'm just
but-
saying, you don't
Yeah, no, I
want
agree.
to, but I'm just saying they could.
I'm saying, okay, my feeling was, okay, I'm going from,
I think that's the warning bell.
I think it would be respectful to turn off the phone so it doesn't ring.
Alright, we can move on, if there's alright from cable, alright, moving on to IT. IT, you can find the IT budget on page 2020.
Can we take a 5-minute break, sir?
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
5-minute break.
Recess, or
Don't
whatever
we
you
have
wanna
like 2
call it.
left?
Yeah, we got two.
We get Zoom
Didn't do it
fixed, so
anymore.
or no? So is Tom on?
We're dialing each other, they cause trouble.
Good.
Oh.
Relatively speaking. Oh, yeah.
That's why that
My year end right now, so.
$5,800 here. I said, I said, you're gonna pay that.
Actually, our books closed yesterday. We have a 2-day close.
So what's your year? Austin, I'm sure Leah's mentioned, but 220, do you have any idea
It was
why
228.
there seem to be
And
some of us that can't
So ours
log into
is, so
the Zoom links?
our month starts, it's fucked up.
Yeah, so well, Zoom is, I know we got a notification that Zoom is now
And we are on a
starting to
5-week
require
rotation.
authentication, so you have to log into your Zoom account.
When they get money from the company.
Your Zoom account.
And then every 3 or 4 years is a 53, so then it's 545.
So the same thing happened to me, I had to log into my
Our
Zoom credentials
is
and
every
and
single
then I
month,
got it.
and every single year, it's never the same.
I was not logged
I mean,
in. I don't think I
obviously
used to
every
have one.
15 years, it's the same, right?
You can get in, it just for some reason it wants you to also, almost sort of double.
My last job, and that was
Just after you yell at me.
It was her fault. I don't care who it is. It's all very juvenile.
Well, that happened to me
This
earlier,
is,
right?
you know,
I
ridiculous.
I didn't have anything to do with
This
it.
is not a 4th-grade class.
It's,
On my desktop,
Yeah.
it was fine. And
Never
my
had
laptop, I had to
me in.
delete
I
it.
want this is
Alright,
good.
I'll have to-
Technically,
I don't think
I mean,
actually
I gotta get
normally
some
it should be like a
So maybe we
224.
just need to set something up.
It's,
Because
I think it was.
it must be that.
We do it all the time, yeah. I mean, so some of our closes are as early as like the 20th of the year. And then sometimes we're closing on the second day.
It was bad, it went down.
Second week, or the first day, the first week of.
Thank you very much.
It's really,
Because I use it for my book club, but I never have to do any login for that. It's weird.
it's all of my reporting.
It's been worse.
I have like the calendar for like previous years. I have all of like what period,
So you're
because
gonna deliver the
each of those
cookies earlier in
individual
the day?
months, we don't call.
As long as we get cookies, it's fine. I mean,
So I have to
you
break
started
out.
it last year.
If you try to like look at future years, you
Well,
don't
thank you.
technically know what it's gonna be.
Tree fells?
So you have to like. Well, it's always like, it's period 1, period 2, period 3, and then you just match period to period.
Venus is going on.
Yeah, it sucks. It's That's the most irritating thing.
Well, I think it did go through, cause if I.
But I guess you get used to it, I'm just used to it now.
Oh,
I don't wanna do it anymore though.
It's a farm nursery. So what do they do?
But we always close on Tuesday.
Make a motion to reconvene, sir.
Everyone good to go? Alrighty. So our IT budget, can be found on page 23 of the budget book. So our IT services, we, have a fixed price contract with CM Geeks as our IT service provider. So 55,000, is the fixed price contract for FY '25 and FY '26. The principal change in FY '25, at the fall town meeting, we increased the purchase services line item by 30,000 to pay for our town internet. We have since created a new line item, to track that more closely, so you can see that split out, for FY '26. Our town phones covers all of the town cell phones, is that correct?
Cell phones and our landlines.
Our landlines. Tamika's done a good job over the past year to clean up some of our phone lines, whether it's cell phones that are no longer in existence, landlines that are no longer in existence, so yeah, so we've reduced some of the costs there. So I just added a slight increase just for any sort of contractual increases that may come there. No changes to our IT supplies, kind of a line item that is barely, if at all used. I didn't see much activity over the past few years there, other than the $1 that occurred in FY '24, which is a weird one. And then our e-permitting software, this covers two software subscriptions. One is our Viewpoint or our OpenGov software, it's our permitting software. But this line item also covers the costs associated with our annual service fee for our town website. And the increases there are just based off of our assumptions from both of those vendors.
Question?
Yes.
On the internet purchase services, we use CM Geeks. Is that a one-year contract or is it a multiple year?
It's a multi-year contract, yeah, so we do kind of a multi-year service contract at a fixed price.
Does it have an inflation clause to it?
No, I was actually surprised, talking with Paul McKenzie, at CM Geeks. I was going to put in an increase, but he said, no, it's a fixed price, not to exceed every year.
So the reason I ask you went from 43, 470, 04 and 24.
Yep.
To 55, so was the multi-year contract up in 24 and we renegotiated?
Yeah, well, so 25 and 26 are under, the, current 2-year agreement with CM Geeks.
Okay, 2-year agreement.
And if I may, I was just gonna say, there was also an increase because we had that requirement to add multi-factor authentication and different things, so that increased our monthly bill.
Other than that, slight increase just overall, $1,800, 1.33%.
For town internet, do we use one service provider?
Yes,
Okay, which is
Spectrum.
Spectrum.
We did, we've actually saved the town actually a substantial amount of money. We received a $200,000 fiber grant from the Commonwealth to expand fiber optic cable to all town buildings, including the water treatment plant and the community / senior center. We had actually separate internet circuits at every building, which was a substantial increase that was previously covered by ARPA. After having that grant, all buildings connected, we're just running off of one internet circuit at the public safety building, using their servers and providing internet to all town buildings.
Is that all used up now?
ARPA?
The $200,000?
Not yet, we still have a few bills outstanding from Phoenix Communications. Why, you wanna spend it?
Yeah, I'd like it to the old fire station.
That'd be a separate grant, Darren. Yeah, no, so we received a cost estimate from Phoenix to also expand in the interest of good faith trying to lower some of the costs for our partners at the school district and expanding to our other town buildings. We wanted to expand the fiber network to the 3 schools as well. The total cost of that project would be $550,000. The grant cap was $250,000, so we just did the town buildings first, and then we wanna work with the school district to apply for a grant to expand fiber to their buildings as well.
Because they've helped us out so much, we should go right out and help them.
Say that out loud.
Question, Austin?
Maybe we can lump in the old fire station, I don't know.
It is
Across
a
the
town
street from
building,
Naquag.
it's a town building.
Yeah, well, you probably have access to the public Wi-Fi from the library there, no?
Not quite.
Yeah.
We try.
Get an extender.
Sorry.
E-permitting,
Yeah.
is that a 2-year contract?
No, that's we don't have a fixed term with that, that's kind of a software as a service, we subscribe to that every year for our Viewpoint subscription.
The reason I ask is, it looks like 21, 22 was okay, then we had a jump.
Yep.
Then 23, 24, and then we had a jump, so I just thought it might have been a 2-year contract.
Yeah, so the big jump that, as I mentioned earlier, the big jump that you're gonna see from 24 to 25 was in 25 and 26, we're also incorporating the cost of the town website that we have. So the difference, the cost of the permitting software is around 29,000, and the difference is our annual subscription for our Civic Plus website. Alright. And finally, on page 25 is the boards and commissions budget. So this was a budget that also, as I mentioned earlier, would pay a little bit for Tamika's work as secretary for some other boards and commissions. We have since reduced that and shifted those expenses over to the administration budget. Purchase services are, I think each board and commission has had a small budget to do various work, very rarely if at all used. My recommendation for 26 for purchase services was to provide some equity among the boards and commissions, so $250 across the board there. Supplies level funded for RDIC. And the major increase that you see for this budget is increasing our reserve fund allocation for finance committee from $30,000 in 25 to $35,000 in 26. It's still well below what our policy threshold calls for. It should be several tens of thousands of dollars higher. It just couldn't afford to increase that. It's a certain percentage of our overall operating spend that we should have in our FinCom reserve fund. So increase the reserve fund by 5,000, 16%. Overall budget increase is just about 4% at $1,400.
On that reserve fund, do we have leftover at the end of the year?
That goes to free cash at the end of the year.
It goes back, but we do have leftover, I mean, it's not that we use everything.
In 24, we didn't use it at all.
Okay.
What do we typically use it for?
So the reserve fund ends up being transfers from other departments that do not have sufficient funds. So if they don't have sufficient funds within their respective lines, or we don't have sufficient funds within other lines to pay for those expenses, we'll come to the finance committee to ask for a reserve fund transfer. And those occur starting end of the year, May 1st?
The reserve fund can be all year.
Well, line item transfers is the end of the year, right?
It's year-end transfers, yeah. Reserve fund is unexpected oh gosh, there's, I'm not doing, it's too tough. Unexpected,
Unforeseen stuff.
thank you so much, that's the word that the tongue was not using, I appreciate that. Unforeseen, and there are,
You made up for your
times
phone.
that something happens and we can't anticipate, it's something we don't anticipate, so. When budgets are tight, it's prudent to have more in that.
Contingency.
Yes,
We've been
that's-
trying.
But each year it goes back into the general fund?
Yes, if not expended, it then closes to free cash, yes, it's not something that rolls,
So that's part of our free cash for the following year then.
correct.
Yeah, it's weird, it's called a reserve fund, but it's not actually a
Every
reserve
single line
fund.
item that's not a revolving fund goes to the general, goes back to the general after.
It's unexpended.
Yep.
So what normally, Ken, do we end up with free cash to start with, the stuff that's not used on this budget?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
He's saying how much, like, on average do we, like, goes to the bottom line for free cash from unused?
So for our current certification, it was about our 996 was about half and half, Donna, from excess revenues and unspent appropriations, I think was it's not quite 50% between the two, but
I think it's different, and every year it can be every year.
I'd say it's somewhere between 3 and 500,000.
Well, that's what I'm gonna get.
So
at.
tighter
The
years.
average. That's money that we didn't use that went back into free cash. Okay.
last year, without it having in front of me, I wanna say it was within that range of 3 to 5. And the remaining was excess revenue.
Because the certified free cash that, like you just mentioned, 900 and it's 700 and then it's 4, whatever. That includes other funds that have come in during the year from some other thing that happened.
Yep. So
That we
for
didn't know
example,
about either, so. but-
for example, like our investment income, we budgeted, I think 60,000, we made over $100,000, right? So that was great for us to generate free
But
cash.
the line item things in general is 3 to 500.
Yep.
I realize that we're not talking about that, but, and
Yep.
the boards and commission stipends are within their departments and not, but I think if we need to do cuts, I know that we're not talking about it, but that would be a first line of cuts for me. I know we, like I said, aren't talking about it, but I just wanted to put it out there that I
We're gonna
think,
talk about it.
We're not talking about it though.
We're not?
Not right now.
We're gonna talk about something in a minute.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
But he's just presenting one budget right now.
So I just at the end of this slide, I just wanted to show, this is again, a condensed version of our total spend. You can see our net position this year and future years following the same assumptions, right? So with updated town and school figures there, you see high level. This is the same, the same figures that you see in your model that I sent out to the group as well, so. This is an open discussion period, if there's any other questions on the budget as presented, obviously we'll have round 2 tomorrow for public safety and public works, but just wanted to show folks this as well.
Is that in any of our paperwork?
Yes.
He said he sent it to us, yeah. It's in the emails.
It's in the email, but is it in?
It's not a good word.
Actually, it's in the budget book, it's not up to date, the budget book doesn't have the most up-to-date school figures, so, the deficit, for example, in 26 in your budget book on page 13. I think the deficit then was approximately 2.3 million, so it's gone down a little bit based off of the reduction in what you said, proposed assessment. Yes, sir.
Austin, on the forecast from 25 to 26, does that, and I'm seeing the numbers are higher versus some of the years, but does that include the increase in valuation of that 133 million? That 2.5, is that based on that increase for next year? That we increased the valuation of the properties?
Yeah, so we increase values every year, this is our levy, right, so this is, levy's obviously tied to value, right, but, we are not permitted to increase our levy, the figures that you see here beyond 2.5 plus new growth, right, so, this, to answer your question, this is inclusive, but, this is just one component of about what your tax bill looks like, it's appropriations and levy combined with, the tax rate and your assessed value.
Right, but the tax.
To answer your question, yes, all of these assumptions will include reductions or additions to your property value.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
I
since the
can't
screen
assume-
is up there, we can ask questions about it, right?
Of course, yeah.
So are you saying your projection is in the 2030, we're gonna be almost $10 million upside down in the town of Rutland?
Yeah, so, those are based
That's
off.
just that year, that's not a combined number,
Just that year.
Yeah.
just that year.
Yeah, so, and, I think as we've spoken about this model over the past few months, right, I've made some assumptions on both the town and the school side. Well, first I've made assumptions that you can see on the revenue side, right, so, being conservative and only budgeting $250,000 in new growth, right? Level funding, state aid, level funding local receipts, and not using any one-time funds, right? So those are the assumptions on the revenue side. On the town side, it's between a 4 to a 4.5% increase on the town spend, and on the education between the assessments for both Wachusett and Bay Path, I have a 10% increase for both of those assessments.
But you're not off millions, you're pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, so to give you an idea, my model that I had for Wachusett for this year, I was only about $150,000 higher in my model compared to what the actual numbers from or proposed numbers from Wachusett were. I was a little lower on Bay Path. I really didn't think that their transportation assessment was gonna be going from 11 to 32,000. So, you know, I was wrong there. But I'm close. Now, you know, this is a projection, this is, you know, just obviously based off assumptions that we can tweak, but these are what I'm forecasting out for future years.
Yeah, but you've got the, like, just what Darren was just asking with that 9 million, I mean, just in the school budget is that $9 million going from, if I can read it right there,
It is, yes, you're correct,
right?
Yeah.
pretty much.
It's 10 million right there.
Yep.
And the revenues, I understand what you did to project it, but all the revenues are flat from that whole
Yeah.
period, so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not realistic, some of those have gotta go up some, I'm
Yeah.
not saying they go up enough to cover it.
Right, but you know how the DOR works, right? I can't forecast for next year unless I can prove it,
I'm not
right?
disagreeing with you, I understand what you did, but I'm just saying, those numbers, there's some other play in there that's gotta take place.
For sure, we'll be in a better position when reality hits, right? But for modeling purposes, the only information I have is what's coming in this year and what prior year actuals were, right? If you were to tell me that, you know, in 2 years, someone's gonna come and we're gonna get $2 million in additional local receipts, that's a little bit more information that we could try to put in and forecast for future years, right? But Department of Revenue is very, very strict.
So-
And actually, an advisory came out today from DOR that you know, said, the subject was FY 26 budget issues. And there was a whole IGR about being conservative with your local receipts and your budget estimates.
I just wanna point out, Austin provided us this model essentially, I forget what the date was, in the late summer, early fall.
Yep.
And you were projecting with the early numbers, a fiscal year 25 or fiscal year 26 deficit of I think 2.5 million. So I just wanna point out that Austin's modeling is really, for this year, was really almost spot on. He had school numbers that he was basing off of previous years' historicals. Those were really close also.
So to give you an idea, in September, I presented to the board my projection for FY 26. The deficit projected for FY 26 was 2.058. And we're at 2.073.
So this 2.073 is very accurate right now.
Yes. It's
So
probably
Wachusett-
95 to 99%.
Wachusett has not, the school committee has not yet voted on the proposed budget that administration has drafted.
They most likely will and approve.
But I think it's being presented on Monday night at their school committee meeting and
So Darren, cause I'm the dumbest guy in the room here, thinks we should start concentrating on 2.073 and how we're gonna get there. All the bright minds in this room, we gotta start thinking about this. How are we getting there? Or we're gonna cut a lot of people's budgets. Anybody figured that one out yet? What are we doing? What is this, what's the mood of the selectmen? Cause unfortunately I have to work every day, so I don't get to review all the meetings, so how do the selectmen, anybody in the room wanna tell me how the selectmen are gonna get there?
Let's say it's mixed, right? There's two proposals. One is to go 2.5, and the other is to go 50-50. Okay,
50-50 meaning what?
meaning we take 50% of that from the town and 50% right now, you have an option of either taking it from cash stabilization or going on a 2.5. You have options, but again, that hasn't been reached or anything or even talked about.
It's been talked about, we spent time on Monday night talking about it, and it was a four-member board, and it was a split board as far as what the consensus was. With two members feeling that if we're going for an override, we should go for the full amount of an override and make us whole that way for next year. And two members feeling that we should do 50-50, and cut essentially 1.1 million from the budget, and then figure out how to raise the other 1.1, whether that's utilizing almost all of stabilization or all of free cash and a little bit of stabilization, and or another override. That was the conversation on Monday night, and there was no
The concern, I proposed a 50-50.
Okay.
The concern I had was for the town's appetite to pass a 2.5. That was my concern. So if we put the 2.5 and it doesn't pass, or let's say it passes the town but doesn't pass the vote, now we're at a slash and burn. Now we have no options. And that was my ultimate objective of the 50-50. Whatever everybody decides on is what it is. I'm not against anything. I'm just saying I am cognizant of what the town went through, the attitude of a lot of people in town for another big override. That they weren't certain, they were hoping that the last override would last where it was supposed to, and it didn't. And a lot of people still remember that. And that was my concern. I wanna see something pass, I wanna see this taken care of. If it's 2.5, we'll throw it out there. If it's 50-50, we give them a choice. That's all I'm talking about.
So, okay, I guess where I'm going with this is, and I think we're on the same page, Harry, is that we gotta come up with a plan and we gotta move forward with it. The limiting factor is our timeline here, right? We're running out of time. And I'm a little nervous of presenting it to or however we're gonna go about letting everybody know. I think that everybody has to know that that last override, we financially, the town of Rutland did a good job staying within their means. Other people took a lot more money.
That's not an accurate statement.
It isn't?
It is not an accurate statement.
The schools didn't take the majority of that
Schools
money?
did not take crap. We had to pay as a town because our, what's the word I'm looking for? Somebody help me with the word I'm looking for. Our minimum local contribution, which is state mandated, went up by like $500,000 in 1 year. And
But the town, where I'm going with this is, yes, we had to pay, but that wasn't the fire department. That wasn't the police department. That was the schools.
the schools didn't take it. The schools didn't get more money. We had to pay, the town of Rutland had to pay that instead of the state paying that.
Okay.
That's an accurate statement, right? I'm not wrong there, right? Okay. So we had to pay that instead of the state paying for it. And then we also had a decline that put the school into hold harmless, which meant that they got less funding from the state as well, which again, we had to cover that because the state's not paying for it.
So if we do this Darren's just trying to figure it out here. We do this 50-50 thing. Next year, we just kick the can, we always use that word.
Absolutely.
We kick the can further down the road.
Yep. Which to
And
be
then
fair is
next year, it's gonna be bigger.
Yep. Which to be fair is what we did this year.
Yes.
Just to be
Oh, no,
blatant,
right.
we took what, about $500,000 in one-time funding to balance this year's budget. So we did it this year, we knew what we were doing, we knew it was gonna, not hurt us, but it was going to make this year more difficult, and here we are. Obviously, the number was smaller last year, it's 500,000, this year we're talking 2 million. And it's only as projected gonna get bigger. Now, I think there's hope. Now, it doesn't mean that the town's budget will change, but there's hope that something will change in the state and the state allocation and the state formula. When that happens, who the heck knows? If that happens, who the heck knows? But we can't be doom and gloom, cause that's never gonna get us anywhere either. But we need to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
So your statement that about the override, we have to have a clear, concise statement of why that $2 million is gone.
Sure.
Because, and that's not out there right now. As a lot of people in town don't understand it. And the first thing we have to do, I think, is, I already stated it, is we have to educate everybody on why that went away, with any hopes of doing anything in the future.
Yep.
And where I'm going with it is, it was affected by, you say, yeah, it was the town, but it was also school funding that screwed us.
I think, if I may, I think Austin, you have a little bit more maybe info on this, but when a lot of the modeling was done for what the projections of that override, the $2 million override would last, some of that information was just assuming level, not taking into account any of the collective bargaining agreement increases. It was
Right.
restorative, right? It put us back to where we should be at a staffing level. And it didn't go back and historically look at Rutland's personal contribution to the schools.
Right, but,
So-
but people need to know that
Right.
the reason why it went 11 months is because the state funding formula for the schools changed.
We've talked about this ad nauseum.
Yeah, but nobody in the town knows it. Let's go, I'll buy coffee tomorrow morning, go uptown and talk
I
to
don't
somebody.
doubt that at all, but why don't they know?
But the reason it changed too is because the demographics in Rutland is changing.
Correct.
We're becoming more affluent, we've got more household income, so that's why the formula is changing.
Yeah.
And that's not gonna help any, we're gonna have the same conversation every year, cause that's not gonna go
Well,
away.
what that's telling, what the state is telling us is that we can afford to pay more.
Right.
And they're saying, you guys are paying, you're getting a base base tax levy of this, you can afford more. That's what they're telling us.
So I just,
Whether that's true or not, trust
I
me,
think
I'm
we
not
have to
saying
have
it is.
some sort of an educational campaign to let people know that, because I don't think the majority of, while I agree with what you're saying, I don't think that the town's people are educated enough about this subject.
Yeah, and just one last, so that's happening, the same exact, and I sent an email to you guys, the same exact thing is happening in this year. It's a $450,000 increase in the minimum state contribution that the town of Rutland is paying. And that's again because we are more and more affluent as a town.
Correct.
I agree with you, Darren, and I think regardless, we need to keep advocating for changes for that formula. That's not gonna change our position this year, next year, at any time, so we can probably expect these significant increases from the school budget. I watched some of the school committee meeting where they were talking about how their budget has increased over the last 10 years. I wanna say they said it was 46%.
40-something%, yeah.
Not at a higher rate than if you take the school budget out of the municipal town, which is also at 46%, which is good. But to me, what I feel like they neglect to understand or acknowledge is that 46% of what's the total school budget, 120 something million?
60% of our budget, yeah.
Compared to our 20 million budget is a very, very different number. So if you're talking about 46% over that 10 years on 120 versus 20, yes, they increased at the same rate, but you keep giving us a bigger and bigger numbers. Again, not, it is what it is, it works it out that way, but again, to your point, Darren, explaining that to the residents that it's not, this is where it's coming from, and it's not, and again, I keep saying this, it's not in the control of the town. We can't force the school to change their budget unless it gets voted down, but they need to understand that it's just, this is why it's happening, but how do you communicate that, and is that gonna change their perspective? They're still gonna be asked to pay more.
And I will, looking at the school's budget, the majority of the increase is COLA increases, it's a.
Health insurance.
It's a health insurance, yeah, the increase in the salaries was like a 3.5% COLA increase, or it averaged out to 3.5, I wanna say. which is relatively within reason of current inflation rates. I mean, that's, I hate to say it, but that's where we're at.
Unfortunately.
Healthcare was insane, as is our town,
Ours
right?
is too.
And a lot of, that's what we're hearing all over the place, not everyone, but,
We gotta go into this where, I'm not gonna pit myself against the schools, because the schools do an excellent job with what they do. And it's their job as a school committee and superintendent to come in with a budget that's their job, like the fire department's job and the police job. I commend them, they're doing a great job, but we're gonna be pitting, unfortunately, in the town of Rutland, unless we educate people, we're gonna be pitting everybody against the schools for the next 6 years, 5 years. And
Perpetuity, yeah, I mean, that's where we've been historically, and that's why I think we need to be, and that's part of my personal opinion is if we're going for an override, to me, it's clear we need to do something, we need to raise revenue somehow. Whether it's 1 million, 1.1 million, whether it's 2 million, whatever, we need to raise revenue. And my perspective is if we're going to go and ask the town for anything, then we ask to get us to at minimum where we're gonna be zero next year with level services in town, because how can we go into the community and say we're gonna cut services, because even if we have $1 million in cuts, that's still cutting services, that's cutting personnel, that's cutting hours, that's cutting, so we're gonna say we're gonna cut all this, but we're still gonna ask you for more money. And next year, we're gonna be in an even worse position than this, and if we don't ask for an override and we use all of our free cash,
it's gonna be bigger.
that's a bigger concern, because and if we use all of our stabilization only grows at 5% of our free cash per year, so it's not like we're dumping all of this money into stabilization that really we hear in select board goals and objectives and town administrator goals and objectives that we need to start investing in our buildings, we need to start investing in our infrastructure, and that's what free cash ultimately should be used for. Select board this time last year, approved financial policies. It said we weren't going to use one-time revenues to fund ongoing expenses, i.e. the budget, and that we would make that commitment to improving our infrastructure, which ultimately is going to have cost savings down the road. Again, it's not gonna be realized immediately, but it's gonna be realized in the coming years. And so I feel like we've been in this vicious cycle of we don't really wanna address the root problem. Austin has data showing that it's a structural issue. It's been a structural issue, and we don't wanna do anything to actually address it, so that then we can stop this floundering every year. We can catch our breath, we can actually do some work, we can do some staffing analysis to see where those efficiencies can be better realized than just kind of arbitrarily cutting or throwing money here or there or whatever. And utilizing some data-driven points to keep us, so that maybe by 2030, we're not looking at $10 million deficit.
I am cautious of the 2.5 because there is no choice. If it doesn't pass, we will be worse off than under the 50-50. It'll be a slash and burn. Because we've already seen what Austin has presented to us under a total $2.2 million slash in the town. And I want the town to accept something so we don't have to damage the town that fast where we've gone so far. But hearing what I'm hearing, I just talked to 2 people today, seniors, but I talked to 2 of them. And they said, no way am I voting, I don't care what happens, I'm not voting for it. Because if I vote for it, I might as well move out of town, because I can't afford it. That's the attitude of a lot of people, and you go to the sportsman's club, you're probably gonna hear the same thing from those guys. You're not gonna pass this. So my point, the whole purpose was not to try to make the town hard to do. It was like, here's the options. We can decide how much we wanna take from the town, how much we wanna ask for them. And it wouldn't be a slash and burn, because we're trying to do a little of each. But if it doesn't pass, we're done. We got no repercussions.
So if we do that, what do we do next year?
The same thing we're gonna do under 2.5. We'll have to deal with it next year.
But I guess, and my point, and this is and I've said it the past couple years, we as a town need to have a very real inward conversation with ourselves, each individual family. This is the level of services that we want, and this is what it costs to have those level of services. And you can go through and say, I'm gonna take $10 from this account or $1,000 from this account, but ultimately, it's not gonna get us to $2 million. It's not. And so if we
But if
aren't,
it doesn't pass, you're gonna have to.
yes, but then we're saying that we aren't willing to pay for the level of services that we want. And we can't continue to say, we want all of this, but we're not gonna pay for it.
That's a town decision. I
And that's-
agree,
and
but
so
but
that's where I'm saying, then put this,
Right, but I'm
tell
saying
the town it
if-
costs $2 million to do it. And this is what we need to keep us on a better financial trajectory than what we have been and try to build financial stability in the coming years.
I mean, if you're
So
looking.
I'm not against 2.5. I just don't think it's gonna fly. And if we want it to fly, we have to be out there absolutely
Absolutely.
telling the town what we
Absolutely.
have to do and how much impact, whether you wanted to put the school or not, how much impact the school has on this town, and this is why we're passing 2.5. If it wasn't for the school up that budget, we wouldn't be passing at 2.5. So it is on the school, it is on the onus of that. And the town needs to know that instead of blaming us for overspending or doing this or whatever. So it really has to be done right, it's like a marketing program,
So
so.
saying it's on the schools, like, I'm sorry,
It's
but
not.
I want all of our children in town to be educated to the best. Like, isn't that a goal we should as a town strive towards? And not limit the kids in the school, like, I don't understand this thought process of saying like, the school is taking something, they're not taking anything from us.
I'm not
They're
talking
costing a
about-
lot of money, but they're not taking something from us.
Alex, I'm talking about numbers. I'm not talking about, should our kids get a good education? I'm talking about, of the 2.2 million, how much of that is responsible for the school?
Right, but the school budget isn't, they're not increasing it by 1.6 million arbitrarily. They're receiving less money from the state, which is why their budget
Correct.
percentage, if you will, has not overly increased. They're just not getting as much money. We're, like Alex said,
Do you have the-
we have to foot the bill for the difference.
School.
I mean, to me, ultimately, the school's not the problem, the state is the problem.
Yes, but that's
Boston's the
not going
problem, and I
to
said
change
that.
our
But for
our
now,
issue
we
right
gotta
now.
deal with a $1.6 million
But
roughly.
but with the 50-50, you're also assuming that that's gonna pass. And that may not,
But if it does pass at 1 million, then at least we're someplace. If the 2.5 passes, great. But if it doesn't, this town's really in trouble for
But
next
you
year.
can't put both
then
on
you-
the, you can't put
Yeah.
both,
Right.
what, we have to make, or actually, the select board has to make that choice. Like, we can't, it's not giving the townspeople a choice.
That's what I mean, it isn't. You'll come up with a budget, regardless of what it is. We'll come up with a budget to present to the town, period.
and I understand the reasoning of, we're trying to make it a little bit more palatable for residents to pass an override. But it's not going to, we're saying that this is what we have, this is what we feel that the town needs as far as services. It's going to cost this much, this is what we're asking you for, and if you're not willing to do that, then okay, then you vote no, and we deal with it
Go with it.
right at that.
That's-
We shouldn't be saying, we only need $1 million, because that's not true.
Well, what
So
scares
cutting $1
me,
million
No, it's
that are
not.
detrimental.
I don't even wanna go 5 years, guys. Next year's 4 something.
Right,
It's not gonna get,
It's not gonna
somehow
get
we
any
gotta
better.
fix it.
So Austin had provided the select board modeling also, that was essentially at the time, I think it was a $2.5 million override forecasted would be a year. I think a $5 million override was in the 2 to 3 year time frame, and then a $7 million override was in the 4-ish year time frame.
Well, that- yeah.
I think that those numbers have been changed a little bit,
15, 16, and 17 in my book.
right,
I wanna give Peter an opportunity, he's had his hand up for a while, and I haven't forgot about you too. I don't know if you want to. Go ahead, Pete.
So can you guys hear me?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, very loud.
Oh, yeah. I apologize for that. Just a couple of things. The first is that I appreciate the efforts of the town departments and the town managers did to put the budget together. Obviously, this is a lot of work. And they're under, excuse me, they're under an awful lot of pressure. Just trying to do their jobs and then not create rebellion in the town. And then the expression of appreciation goes to the town administrator and his staff. I apologize for not being there tonight, but I've been able to go ahead and follow this budget very easily. I don't have the printout, but I was able to open up the worksheet or the package online and just follow it because Austin had the page numbers referenced and it was easy to be able to go to. So I do appreciate the effort that these folks put in. And then finally, this forecast. I I like I've been looking for a forecast like this for the whole length of time that I've been on the finance committee. And it does a couple of things. One thing is that it it gives a picture of what's going on. And it's obviously it's not a pretty picture, but it's a picture. It says this is where things are going. And it should be conversation. I mean, I understand we need to be able to have the conversation with the town folks to be able to say this is why, this is what's going on. There's more money going to the schools, and it's going to the schools because of they feel the state feels we can pay more, whatever the reason is. But we are spending more money, and the forecast will tell everyone we need to work on this. This is something we need to do. And I know you guys have all been saying this, but it is just it's a call for action. And it becomes a matter of having the conversation and not trying to tell people what they should do, but asking them how they would like it handled. And so if this is going to be the spending, um, I mean, we had that town meeting, that special town meeting. We had that one fellow come in and ask us, ask the town if they would allow, if the town would allow him to be able to go ahead and have another dispensary or retail cannabis shop. And the answer was no, that we don't want to have that in our town. And I think that's an attitudinal change for the town, the township, the members of the town, that this is it's a particular kind of community. We want it to be able to stay that way. And as one young fellow stood up and said, I'm willing to pay a few more bucks to be able to do that. Well, that has got to be, I think, an understanding, or at least a conversation with the townsfolk. We are all townsfolk. We need to be able to make the decision as to what we want to be able to do. If we don't want to spend the money, then we're going to affect something. If we don't want to affect anything, we have to spend the money. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you, and I'll talk to you guys later.
You wanna say something?
Just a couple things. You guys, as finance committee, asked school committee and administration for the schools to forecast ahead. This year, Dr. Riley did that. You'll find all about that next week. But Austin did that too, right? The numbers he projected were terrific. You guys asked for this information. You were given this information. Now we have something to expect. Austin also presented options like Leah mentioned about the $5 million, $7 million, right? This town has been so short-sighted over the past dozen years at least that I've been paying attention. And he finally proposed an option that gives us an opportunity to plan, to save, to invest, that is now not even being considered is unfathomable to me. Separately, what I really raised my hand for was because I just wanted to let you all know that on March 24th, legislative hearing is going to be happening at UMass. UMass Amherst. Thank you. They're asking, MARS, Mass Association of Regional Schools, MASC, MMA, they're asking that anyone who can go and speak to the legislators, to go and support, to write letters, to tell us what your town is going to be losing out on because the funding formula is so screwed up. Individual letters, if you guys wanna get together and write letters, like to actually hand these letters to the legislature on March 24th. So I would highly encourage you to do that. We've been talking about advocacy for years and years about changing the funding formula, and nobody's ever stepped up to do it. This year it's actually happening. There's 232 towns out of the 318 districts in the state that are in hold harmless this year. It's not right, the funding formula is broken. It's not gonna fix this year, but it might fix that 10-year projection you're looking at.
But to that point, we still have to plan for the FY30.
Yep.
And then we need to plan towards that, and if the funding formula ends up helping us, that's just going to lower the tax rate that we have to charge in those future years. So the tax rate will come down in accordance with actual cost. Now, the fear of the townspeople, and Darren, you say this all the time, how do we know that they're not just gonna increase the budget to make the difference up of whatever they're getting from the state in increased amount, right? We talk about this all the time, we can't guarantee, like, nobody can guarantee that, right? But what else can we do? We need to do what we can do and hopefully be optimistic that something is going to be positive in the future. I can't help but be optimistic to some degree. Sorry, go.
Is it safe to surmise from these conversations that we've been hearing that this town can no longer be a Proposition 2.5 override town? I mean, Proposition 2.5 without override, so 2.5% is just, we can't expect that. We've been living in it. Is that the structural, and I think that as a resident, I've heard of Monday night tonight that there's structural problems, and I think what the town needs to hear is what are the solutions, what are the things that are on the table for that? And I think one of them is to admit that we're no longer a 2.5% increase in taxes every year, we're much more than that.
Carol, I think you make a really good point, because I think if you look at some of the more successful and I'll say more successful smaller bedroom communities, they have more regular 2.5 overrides, or they have more commercial. We don't have the commercial. There's not a lot of appetite in town. We hear that everybody wants more economic development, but they don't want more retail marijuana, understandable. They don't want more traffic, a warehouse or something that's going to create a whole lot more truck traffic. They don't want this, they don't want that. So the sentiment is we need more economic development, but the truth of the matter is it's going to be small business economic development, which isn't going to have the quote unquote burden on the schools, but it's also not going to bring in, I think, Austin, for residents to see any sort of significant impact, positive impact on their tax bill. We would need like a huge, massive, larger than the Charlton size Amazon facility to come in, and then it would be a negligible notice drop on the residents' tax bills, because it's just not there. We don't have that capacity for that high level of economic development.
Or the appetite.
Or the appetite for it.
Or the infrastructure.
Well, I will say, I was very pleased to hear John Charbonneau talking about something on 68, I've been saying that for years.
Yep.
So, I think that that's just enough to the outskirts of town that.
Well, and again, if that stuff goes into play and we have a, let's say, $7 million override, that stuff goes in, we have increased revenues from commercial or industrial, that'll offset again the personal property tax, so that will lower if that stuff goes in. So it's not like we're putting in, we're talking, I'm talking about a $7 million override, but it doesn't mean that that's gonna be charged, first of all, next year, right? It's not gonna happen the year after, and it may or may not impact, going forward, because maybe we have some offsets, whether it's increased state aid for school, increased industrial commercial. So it doesn't mean that we hit that $7 million mark in 3 years maybe it's 4 years, again, we can only do the best we can do and then we have to hope. Cause we can't, once you get out 3 years, you can't forecast, it's, everything could change, we could be in World War III, who the hell knows? So forecasting out 3 years is a very difficult proposition.
We've been kicking ourselves in the can for years on getting things rolling in this town as far as getting businesses and industry and this sort of thing involved in it, okay? We can continue to kick the can down the road, which is just what we've been doing, all right? If you wanna face up to it, we have to face up to it, but you've got to look at this right square in the face and say, okay, this is what we gotta do. We have an EDI, a couple of committees out there that are looking into this. You know, what have we heard from them? I don't know. I haven't heard anything too much, but that's just me. Maybe there's things that have come down that I don't know about. I won't argue that point, but it is.
You better don't get someone 68 years old.
Can I say one thing? As a taxpayer, and a lot of what I hear around town from people, and I think people's frustrations are, you know, you can't have, there's three things you cannot have together. You can't have an excellent school system, low taxes, and a rural feel, right? We all know that. So, but I think there's one thing, and the people look up to the finance and the select board at the meetings and the town administrator when, you know, you make recommendations. And you know what? We're not even in the top 50% for a school district. So if we want people to pay more, I think they will if they see more value in the school.
Yeah.
There are parents complaining all the time that they're not getting the value out of the school. And I think that we need to work with the school so they realize that they're top heavy. They need to bring maybe some of those people down at another level, support the elementary schools and bring I don't know what the answer is, but they need to do better if people are gonna accept the fact
I
that they
think,
have to
but
pay
we
high
need to be better about educating ourselves on what the school's doing, because this administration is hand over fist more transparent than we've ever seen, providing the data, and they had a whole presentation on Thursday night, and I think they were at the Council on Aging on Friday, and pretty much very similar. They're not top heavy. We're not overburdened with teachers in town. If you look at,
I think the administration is top heavy at the high school versus the lower levels where they're not reading. They don't need an administrator for every grade.
But that's what they're addressing in their strategic plan, and that's part of their plan that they've been presenting, is that they are addressing that. And that's what I'm saying, is that we as community members, all of us in this room, anybody listening, anybody needs to make the effort to understand just like what we're doing here, we need to understand what we're doing here. We also need to understand what the schools are doing, and not just continue to perpetuate a narrative that has been ongoing, but the data is changing.
But I think they need to change a little and provide a little. I think if people saw that they're doing a better job at providing to the kids, because we're not in the top 50% of the state. If they were doing an excellent job, we'd be rated higher.
They presented that, they just have been going around and presenting that data and telling everybody what their plan is to address this, and investing in the elementary schools. And
we haven't been in the top for a long time, so.
We haven't had an administration that would admit it.
This administration also started,
But we're
what,
telling
2.5
people all the
years
time, we
ago?
gotta keep paying the schools. If you don't have an administration that will admit it, then we have to do something about that. It's not gonna get fixed because you see one new superintendent come in
It's
that's.
gonna take time though, frankly, I mean, but that's where the strategic plan and the plan comes into place. If they put, if the administration superintendent puts a plan in place and says, this is my goal, here's how we're working towards that goal, what else can we ask for? You can't say like, I wanna be a 70%, top 70% tomorrow, it doesn't work like that, like, we need to work towards
In all of the
something.
meetings that you and Leah have been going to with the schools, have you asked them for a budget earlier than the end of March?
Yes, we have, and Austin's been asking administration for that also.
I know he has. I'm asking you two, cause you guys went to a bunch of meetings that,
We asked what was the first one, in the end of January, was it, that we asked? And I've been
so,
asking
and what was their answer?
that they were working on it and that they wanted more solid numbers from the state, because they didn't, and we have a school committee member here, but I don't wanna say.
No, and I understand that, but what I'm saying is we can't keep waiting, and it's not fair to any one of the 5 towns, in my opinion, that we don't get the school budget, which is 60% of our budget at the end of March. Cause now that leaves no time, you guys have to get your
Any
de-
warrant article or
decision by
ballot article.
April 9th, and now we're all scrambling. There's gotta be some push, I understand, we all would love to wait until there was more firm numbers from the state, we'd all love that. But then we wouldn't be doing fiscal 25 budget until about, 26 budget until what, October? I mean, it doesn't work that way.
I mean, Austin did, I wanna give Austin a lot of credit, he did a lot of work to
I have-
understand the.
But I'm saying 60% of our budget comes in at the end of March.
Can I respond to Karen?
Yeah.
You mentioned the same thing at the last meeting where the school committee members were, so I brought that back to administration.
Yeah.
And at our budget retreat, expressing to them that Rutland was interested in numbers early, because I had asked you, even if the numbers aren't as accurate, and you said yes.
Yeah.
And they said yes. They said if you don't care that the numbers aren't gonna be perfect, that they can present you numbers early.
I don't want 50% difference.
Yeah, but.
Well, I'm just telling you
It's
that,
gonna be a
I
forecasted
presented
number.
that to them directly.
It's at least a
and they said
preliminary,
yes.
it's better than what we have now. So if they've said yes and committed to that, that'd be great.
So 1 year aside, I get it, and I don't disagree with you that we should be getting that earlier, and that would be very helpful overall. But what's more important, frankly, to me, is their 3-year plan, their 5-year plan. If we had a forecast from them to say 3 years from now, here's what our expected expense, again, it's not gonna be accurate, right? There's gonna be some inaccuracies.
Sure.
But we can then change our forecast to implement those numbers. And
And
we'll
Austin
know
did that,
again
right?
what we're working towards and what we have to fund, and that'll give us some more, like, I looked at their strategic plan. It's a little underwhelming. There's not much to it, it's short, it's small.
The strategic plan doesn't have a lot of numbers, it has a lot of result-oriented student information.
Yeah, it's very limited. But that doesn't help us, right? Like, it helps us in going out to the town to say, here's what they're trying to accomplish, but it doesn't help right now with saying like, hey, what do we need to fund?
But that's, I mean, I think Jim has provided saying that his hope is, his plan, his 3-year plan is level services plus 1%. For the next 3 years. And that's his plan, and I think obviously that what that level services number is going to vary a little bit, especially if we're unexpectedly again in hold harmless or something of that
It's
nature.
probably not gonna change, right?
But, I mean, we're not in a good position, it's gonna take a big push, but the school committee, administration and the committee are looking at ways to try to address some of that. It's not, again, gonna be a fix for next year, or probably even the year after. But Austin also has done a lot of work to understand the school funding, not only for regional schools, but also per our regional agreement, because it's the regional funding is set by the state, and then our school regional agreement, district regional agreement is additional to that. So Austin's done a lot of work to try to, independently, but also with the school administration to understand where those numbers are coming from and how he can try to model that and put it in. And it's been the most involved I've seen any of our administrators in trying to work with the schools, and we're fortunate because we have school administration that is now willing to work with us also. But Austin has spent, I don't wanna underestimate the amount of time Austin and all of staff have done to provide these numbers, to get us to a more true model.
Question, cause things I've heard in the community and a question that I anticipate we're gonna get, and I don't know what the answer is, then why don't we just leave the district? I don't know what the answer to that is.
So it's not easy per the regional agreement. Then I believe the other 4 towns need to submit to us leaving the district, any community, as well as the district needs to agree to it. Also, the amount of infrastructure and HR related stuff that happens in the district, in the school is massive, and to start that from an organic perspective in town would take a massive infusion of cash.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say it would cost the same, if not more, if we
We'd
were to
have
do it
to build a
on
high
our
school.
I mean, in the
We'd
short
have to
term,
build a
it
high
would
school.
probably cost us a lot more money, in the long term, who knows?
And in long term,
You'd still have your minimum local contribution.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
That doesn't change.
Okay.
You're still, you're gonna, it's gonna be worse.
So the only thing, and I gotta confirm, you said the school's doing level services plus 1%. This budget is level funded, which means we had $10 this year, we have $10 next year. At $10, as we all know, isn't buying nearly as much. So we're losing stuff and still needing to ask for more.
So. to
That's
that-
a really important thing to be stated over and over and over again, because I don't think that's, they're only doing level service plus 1%. We're doing level funded with only contractual.
I'd be disappointed in the school hierarchy and the superintendent if he wasn't pushing for that every year. That's his job.
That's fine, I'm just saying, just know that we're doing level funded.
But Karen, I hear
That's his
that.
job.
And I push back, I agree, Darren, and I think that we in this room need, and town departments need to be better advocates for our town also, to say that we need, to our residents, that this is what we need to stay level services.
Unfortunately, times have changed and the town of Rutland
I know.
has not.
I know.
But now you're out, you got a lot of money. I don't know how it's gonna fly.
So, Karen mentioned that town's level funding plus contractual obligations. But if you look at the school budget, it's not that far different. Because level services, 80% of our budget is staff, and that is all contractual obligations, right? So it's not that far off from that.
But it's level service versus level funded.
But
And
you say level
funding,
service, so I'm just saying that
$10 this year
20%.
buys less next year. It's no
understand
different.
I understand that.
To that point, ours is not technically level funded either because we have
Correct.
contractual
Right.
increases in.
That's correct,
Right.
but there's an awful lot of stuff. Do you think the
Oh, we're
cleaning
definitely
supplies,
losing.
do
Oh,
you think
yeah,
the
yeah.
cleaning supplies are gonna cost the same? I don't know, I go grocery shopping and I know that bottle of spray that I use to clean my cabinets is a lot more expensive this year than it was last year.
There's no doubt we're losing services every single year, but I don't know, I mean,
And I'm not gonna deny, the new administration is so much better than it ever was, and I'm the first person to say that.
So where does that leave us for this year's budget?
well, select board
Has to
has
make a
to
decision.
make a decision on the direction that they want the budget to go. And I mean, you know,
And bearing in mind that we got 5 years of it coming. They can't be short-sighted enough to do 1 year.
It's been going on for the last
No,
20
no, no, but the selectmen have to unfortunately bite the bullet on a big number.
I just wanna, I've said this before, I'm not opposed to a larger override, a 7.57 million. I don't think we're in any position to try and advocate for that this year. We're gonna be lucky if we can get something passed just to level set us.
I'm 100% in agreement with
So
you.
if we wanna do that, we think that's the best thing for this town, I'm all for it, but we need a lot more time to plan so that we can educate and make them see this is what's gonna happen to your taxes, because they're all gonna expect their taxes to go up $7 million that first year that override passes. So you need to have a plan on how you're going to sell that, and we do not have time in this fiscal year for this budget season to do that. That's the only reason why I am not in favor of doing anything more than what we need to get us through to next year, and then take the next steps to figure out.
You have to
More
start in
long-term.
you have to start in the fall
Yes.
or summer.
I was gonna say, really, we need to
As soon as this
essentially
is done.
figure out where we are this year.
Yes.
If an override passes, what that number is, and immediately start
Yes.
with that, because now we have the forecasting.
But honestly, I don't think you can go for I don't think it makes sense to go for a small override this year and a big override next year. I don't think you're gonna get both to pass, if either. I think you need to make a decision, it's either gonna be a big one this year or a big one next year.
And I don't think, to your point, I don't think we can do, and I don't wanna minimize that a $2 million override is not, is still considered a big override for Rutland perspective, right? So, but that's what we need this year, so to do any sort of override this year that we know is gonna put us in a need for something next year is gonna be a challenge.
And this budget addresses nothing with buildings.
Nope.
The new school that we're gonna be building over here in a couple of years?
We,
There's a lot of stuff
we
we're
don't have
missing.
anything of that yet, Darren, that's still, like,
It's coming. Walk
maybe,
through
maybe
that.
not.
Walk through that
Maybe,
place.
maybe not there, right.
Well, it has to eventually. I mean, we're less than 5 years from
But again,
But they've
also,
kicked the cage, they've told us, Harry, at several meetings, that it's coming.
Yep.
How, I mean, I'm
Right, it
not
could be-
saying that it's, and yes, we're all gonna, but we gotta think about those kind of things. How about the town buildings that are all in,
but that's what we have free cash for, if we're not and it's not gonna fix, we're not gonna fix all of our town buildings with free cash, but if we don't utilize free cash for our budgets, then we have some free cash as seed money for grants, whatever. We heard it, and we hear a lot, well, I'm not gonna pass this because this might be coming down the road. I'm not gonna pass this because this might be coming down the road in 3 or 5 years. So we're just not gonna do anything, and we're just gonna continue to fall behind and let that structural deficit grow, because we might have something coming down the road, but we don't know when that something is, or what that something is, or what it's going to cost, because if there's grant opportunities, we're gonna go for grant opportunities. If there's other funding sources, we're gonna go for other funding sources. So
I think, in my opinion, 100% agree with Lynn. If we pass something small this year, the chance of passing something again next year is next to null. Like, I just can't imagine that happening.
Then maybe we do that as part of a cell. We say, look, that we wanna have a bigger plan. We wanna look more towards the future, but I'm sorry.
You think they're
Start
gonna
here
pass 2
to get
years
us
without-
through.
$2 million this year without a plan?
If we think that, I think I don't think an override's gonna pass at 2 million, let alone 7 million.
But I think we
Again,
need to do the advocacy,
we're still
like-
doing damage control on the last one where people don't trust what we're saying, what we need and how long it's gonna last. So how are we supposed to tell them
This has
right
been the
now,
perennial
give us
discussion
$7 million and
for
we're
how
gonna
many
trust
every
us.
years, and it's trying to get the selectmen to put we've asked the selectmen, not you guys, other selectmen boards to put a override on, and they're like, it won't pass, so we don't do it, so we make a cut, or we use free cash, or we don't do this, cause then we do this. It's happened year after year, look at the minutes,
You
you'll
need to
see.
just try it. If
And I
they
think-
vote it down, they vote it down.
And I think to say if we do have a plan for a $5 or $7 million override. We have a longer term plan. We have forecasting that this is what the schools are likely going to be looking at. We have the commitment from the schools that this is what they want, that their plan is. And we have in town knowing that it provides for some growth. It doesn't necessarily address the buildings or the infrastructure, but again, if there's free cash there, that can be better utilized. And so, and it provides us time to create more plans. Right now, I said it on Monday night, I feel like we're in a hamster wheel, like we can't catch our breath, we can't catch our tails, we can't have any thoughtful forward thinking for the financial stability of the town, because we're just constantly trying to figure out how we're gonna survive this upcoming year.
Yeah,
And it starts,
I hate to say it too, but we knew we were gonna be in this position 9 months ago.
we knew it 3 or 4 years ago, but.
but we were.
But we knew, Austin had presented this, we knew we would need X amount of dollars, millions of dollars in 3
We
years.
knew last year at last year's
Yeah,
budget.
so I mean, the fact that we're sitting here saying that we don't
Last
have enough
May.
time is honestly bullshit.
We don't have
Had
enough time.
we just decided to not do
No,
anything about
we've
it.
never talked about a $7 million override until more recently. That was never
It was presented at the beginning of this year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
February
that
3rd.
wasn't an option a couple of years ago. If we had talked about potentially doing a $7
No,
million
yes,
override
correct.
a couple of years ago,
Correct.
that's completely different.
No, but I'm saying we did present it earlier this year, at the beginning of the year, and now here we are 8 months later, still talking about it and not having a decision. If we had made that decision 8 months ago, then we would have
Then we
had
might be
plenty
in a
of time to
different
plan and
place.
get information out.
and I think to your point, Jen and Lynn and Karen, it's been iterations of select boards and staff that don't want to address it and don't wanna be honest. We should have been honest 2 years ago and said, you know what, we're still, when we passed the override 2 years ago, there was still almost $400,000 in one-time revenue as a funding source in that budget. we're not willing to engage the schools. The schools supported it, obviously, but we're not willing to engage the schools and say, hey, what's your next year, 2, 3 years looking like? Because, so we wanna tell our residents that we're gonna make this work because it's Rutland, how we do things, and we do. We are so cost conservative, but sometimes it's detrimental to us because we haven't had the truth. And how many boards have I been on when it was like, we need a $300,000 override, and the board wouldn't even consider it, and that was $300,000, it was gonna be a Band-Aid that was still gonna use $500,000 in free cash, and the board wouldn't consider it. So we haven't been honest with ourselves, and that's part of the reason I have wanted to see a budget without one-time revenue sources in, without anything, so that we can see what a true and honest, and not cutting the COLAs and not cutting this and everything, because I wanna see what it actually costs.
So the 4 of you, minus the one that's not here today, need to make a decision so that we can move forward. I was watching Monday night's meeting and the 4 of you can't get on the same page. You guys are the ones in charge of what we're gonna do. So why don't we adjourn our finance committee meeting and let you guys have a meeting to try to see if you guys can get on the same page?
Karen, that's exactly what I was trying to say. How do you convince the public to do something if you don't have, you just said you don't have confidence in yourself? How is the public gonna have confidence? That's what I mean.
What do you mean we don't have confidence in ourselves?
She just said you can't, you said something about not having confidence, so you don't
There
know
was a
what you're.
stalemate on Monday.
Oh, they don't agree.
No one can,
Right.
no one
But if
can
you
agree
can't-
on what we're
If you
doing.
can't agree together,
The
why can
selectmen
you,
are responsible for saying
how can you stand up
that.
strong and
Well, to
expect
be
the
fair
residents
though,
to?
I mean, that is, they're a democratic political party that is
I'm not-
supporting constituents that they are talking to in the community that are saying one thing and they're trying to support whoever's talking to, like, disagreement is gonna happen, it's.
And I agree,
I'm just
but
meeting
we're
in this
1
room,
month
whatever
from
decision
when we
you
need to
make,
have it done.
stand strong by it.
Well, I'm on the hamster wheel and we're not getting anywhere. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Not us.
second.
Any discussion, Pete's still on, okay, roll call, start with you, Pete, and then we'll go, to Darren.
Larry, aye.
Ross, aye.
Priscilla,
We're good.
Narwhal die.
Winika, aye.
Vote aye.
So, select board. I think the board had wanted to hear some conversation from FinCom on Monday night. We had heard conversation from FinCom now. I think the conversation from FinCom is similar to what the 3 of us that met with FinCom in December is yes, we need an override, and yes, we are going to need overrides, so why not go big and do that advocacy and have it last longer than a year. I think our conversation is the advocacy and the timing piece, and the appetite. And I think, Harry, I don't wanna dismiss the fact that it's very real that anything we do is gonna fail at that. And then no matter what, we're gonna be looking at some cuts. And that's, to me, part of it, I'm supporting my constituents, but more so, I'm trying to look at what is going to make town, Rutland, a more stable community, and the long-term health and plan, so that we're not constantly doing this. Paul said tonight that we've been in this cycle of doing this for years or after years after years, and as an elected leader, I need to answer to the residents, but also I feel like I need to do what is going to put town on a better trajectory.
And to add to that, Leah, I see it as, I understand the whole appetite piece, nobody wants to pay more. But it's also, it's our job to make sure that the town can run and run successfully. And that's going to mean figuring out how to pay for what is needed to do that. And in this case, the only way we have to do that is asking the residents to pass an override. So whether or not we personally agree or want to pay more,
it's in the town's best interest to continue running, to pursue an override for what we are saying we need to run the town. And it's not gonna be an easy pill to swallow, and I said it on Monday. If we put it out there and it gets voted down, then the town is gonna need to decide what it is not willing to pay for, and all those services get cut in perpetuity. You lose everything, if you're not willing to put in more to pay for it, it's gone. Because we cannot keep, like Leah said, flip-flopping, and I understand where you're coming from, moving year to year, but it's not responsible to say, okay, all of a sudden, we're in 10 years down the road, we finally need some more money, we're gonna kick in a little bit more, and then get everything back up to where it should be, only to, after that couple of years, ask for more because nothing keeps up with inflation, nothing keeps up. Just to say, nope, we're not willing to give you any more, and it's, the town's gonna have to figure that out, and the only way we can do that is by putting it in front of them. This is how we want the town to operate, this is how much it's gonna cost, this is how much more we need, if this is what you want. And if you don't, then
And this is, to your point, Jen, I think this is what we hear residents want, this
Right.
level of services,
Right.
if not expanded.
Right.
But there's a cost to that.
Yes.
And I think we have been disingenuous with ourselves historically as to what the true cost of that is. I give this board and last year's board a lot of credit for looking at all the fee schedules and everything, and we're putting more of the onus on the applicants to pay things for things that had been coming out of the general fund. Now, it's small bits and pieces here and there, but we continue to try to realize ways to take some burdens off of the taxpayer or free up monies to be allocated elsewhere.
Yeah.
Again, it's pennies on the dollar, but we're still working on that.
chipping away.
And
Yes.
if we had time to, I'll go back and say it again, if we had time to catch our breath, there's more opportunities to seek additional funding, to realize efficiencies, to spend time to do, I said it tonight, to do staffing analyses. We've talked about different ways to streamline or think outside of the box as far as some of our programmings or department heads' functions and everything. But we can't do that when we're just constantly trying to barely keep our heads above water.
I agree, but my point to that being, I want some of that analysis done to show the town.
Right.
And say, this is why we're asking for this extra buffer of a $7 million override. And I don't think we are in any position to do any of that between now and when we need to for this year.
And I hear that and I push back a little bit and say we aren't gonna be in that position next year either if we are needing to figure out next year because
But if we start, like you said, as soon as this budget gets through, we start, the next day, we start figuring out what that is, where can we make,
But I mean,
efficiencies,
right.
the things that we've heard, can we do consolidations, what is the plan? Because speaking for me personally as a resident, not even as a select board member, I don't wanna give you $7 million right now because I have no idea what that's going to be used for. I want to see some sort of plan for what are you gonna save, how many more roles are we going to end up hiring for, and how much is that going to cost? And am I okay with that as a resident? We have none of that information to share. So that's why I am not comfortable whatsoever asking for any more than we're trying to level fund what we already have. That's it. That's the reason for that.
And I hear that for sure. I think and I hear and I share Lynn's perspective also that $2 million is gonna get us this year, and then we know based on the projections, we're probably gonna be looking at a $1 to $2 million after the next year, and so there's not gonna be the appetite because we hear it. You want $2 million this year, and then you're gonna want $2 million next year, which is true. We have that modeling, right? And so how do we balance it? So do we focus on just this year? I think we had heard from FinCom, again, not a vote, but that they are of a mindset of you're gonna have to do the advocacy and do.
I don't know what I'm advocating for,
right.
though. That's my big question mark. So I'm still not comfortable for doing anything more than, I understand where they're coming from. And again, if we had spent the last 6 months or whatever preparing for that, it would be a completely different story. But we're less than 2 months out now, and we have no plan. And I'm not comfortable advocating for anything other than level funding what we currently have. That's just my opinion.
Harry, Paul?
Simple case of kick your can down the road, itis.
That's what you wanna do, kick it down the road?
That's what we're looking at. In other words, you know, this is a plan, all right, so we're gonna go for an override.
But what kind of an override?
I don't know, what are we talking about? 2.5 or something like that? Again, same as, you know, you did one for 2 years. It lasted a year and, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. And then, you know, it was pretty much exhausted. So, you know, if you're gonna do it for 1 year, then what do you wanna look at? Do you wanna look at just to what? Keep the funding, keep the town's budgets on a level plane, or look for doing something more, or what? In other words, to me, it's just been very frustrating for a number of years in this town of, okay, we can't do this, we can't do that, well, we'll just do an override, okay?
That's our only option.
Gross oversimplification.
I don't think it is, Paul. I think that's our reality. That's our only option if we want
If we wanna
to
maintain.
add more services or
Or even
more
maintain.
anything. Or maintain, exactly.
Well, I thought you were talking level funded.
Well, not level services with what we have, like what Karen was saying, level funded budget. The only thing we're
Yeah,
accounting
okay.
for is COLA and salary increases, contractual obligations. But to Leah's point, it's not leaving anything open for any additional maintenance, anything beyond what we've got. And there will be some losses even with what we're looking at now. But those are I mean, that's what we're trying to figure out is what is your thoughts as far as do we ask for an override and for how much? Are you in favor of the half, the
Well, I
level
think
services or the greater?
we have to come up with a consensus of an amount for an override, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, if we're going to do something like that, then, you know, it's something that we've gotta come up with pretty quickly because times are wasting.
Right. That's what we're asking you, Paul, is what would you support as far as a budget?
So
for
we
an
know,
override?
we know that we are about, I'm gonna round up and say 2.1 million, right? If we were to go for a full override to get us whole to start at 0 next year, it would be 2.1 million. We could round up and say 2.5, but 2.1 is what the numbers show if we wanted to be completely and totally spot on.
Right.
Monday night, the conversation was very much cut 1.1 million of that and figure out a way to raise an additional 1.1 million. I'm rounding. That still is cutting stuff, and it's still figuring out whether the conversation didn't even get to the point as to whether it would be a $1.1 million override or just depleting our financial reserves, going against our financial policies and depleting our financial reserves. So I think those are if we want to address next year, or we don't do anything and we figure out and we say we're cutting the $2.2 million and we're gonna live within our Prop 2.5 means.
You know, simply put, I guess some of the other committees that are doing studying on what to do with the town, how to get business in here and so on and so forth. What have we heard from them?
But that's not gonna help
It's
us
not gonna
this
help
year,
this year.
right now.
I'm just saying right now, okay? So in other words, you know, if we're gonna do an override, you know, I think one of the requisites of the board should be to get some answers as to where we are, what they're looking at, and what they're planning on, and how far down the road, okay? I mean, you know, essentially flying blind right now. And, okay, we've been doing that for too long.
I think we have created, previous boards have created an economic development committee that had really struggled as to what their role was. And this board did a lot of work with RDIC and EDC to better tease out those roles and responsibilities. But that's not gonna help us this year, it's not gonna help us next year. And we as a community have to work with planning and zoning to be a business-friendly community, a true business-friendly community, and not just on the surface. We had a special town meeting because somebody wanted to come in to potentially have an additional marijuana retail license, and that failed with an unfavorable recommendation from the planning board. So we can sit here and say that we're business friendly, but we're not that kind of business friendly. We've heard, there was years ago when there was work at the Heights for a different business, there was a lot of pushback because it was gonna create too much traffic and it was gonna do all of this. So we want all of these things, but we don't want it either. And so we as a community have to, and as a board, and elected boards and committees need to actually do the work to say that. That's not gonna fix this year, next year, even 5 years.
So you're saying the town has a problem accepting change?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
If I may. Couple of things. Number one, I keep hearing that this is what the town wants. But in reality, we don't know what the town wants because we haven't surveyed 10,000 people. We don't really know what the town wants.
We need a master plan,
I was just
though,
gonna say,
right?
the whole
What about-
master plan was all
Yeah,
survey
the
and.
master plan, no, we surveyed how many people out of 10,000? Not that many.
I don't know.
700 or 800, it was
Yeah.
open for months.
Okay, we're changing the subject. My point is, we haven't surveyed the whole town. So to say that 800 people is what they want, we don't know what everybody wants. That's option number one. Two, I sat here and listened to you say several times that we will deplete all the money we have for next year, and that's not true. We got 2.2 million in cash right now. If we spent 1 million on the town and took 1 million from there, we still have $1 million left. Only if we take the whole 2 million will we have. So that's not accurate. I applaud you for both of your discussions in terms of what you want to see. I have said before, whatever the board decides, I'm okay with. I don't think it's gonna fly, but that's the town. What troubles me more than anything with this board is we have somebody who hasn't weighed in. We haven't received an email, a text saying, here's what I'd like to see, here's what I want. If it came down to a vote, here's what I'd do. Because right now we're at a stalemate and we have an individual who hasn't weighed in on this. That's what bothers me about this board. We never should have even discussed this the last time. We should have said, we're gonna wait until we have a 5-member board to do it, because it came out at a stalemate. So I would like to hear from Tom. If he breaks it, that's great. He can help decide what we want. So I hear you two are voting for 2.5. I hear you put, beyond that, you will never get mine or the, as far as I'm concerned, the town's vote. Going for a 5 million, 7 million override without a plan, Jen's right, town ain't gonna buy it. We need time to work on a 5 or a 7 million.
Guys, what does that plan look like?
Exactly.
No, but it's a question.
What plan?
The plan that you're asking for, both, like, is it a strategic plan, is it your master plan, is it a staffing
No, it's-
plan, what is it?
I'm not asking for any plan.
You just did.
No.
You said you wouldn't do it without a plan.
I said, I wouldn't do the fiber without a plan.
Yeah.
So if you wanna put me on the spot and say, what's the plan, I'm gonna tell you,
No, what
I
would you
need
look for in
time
a
to do,
plan?
I need time to
Okay,
make the plan.
to vote yes, what would you look for in a plan? If the election's today, what would make you vote yes
You know
for a $7
what,
million?
Austin, I appreciate the question. I don't think that's the right question here. The question is, if we can't explain that plan to the senior citizens or to everybody in town, it's not gonna fly. that we, as a board, and you need to come up with a plan that says, here's what we wanna do with 5 or 7. I can't say the plan right now.
If I may, for me personally, I would be looking for, I think we've discussed if we do a larger override, that money would end up in some sort of stabilization fund where it could grow and we'd have additional money. That's fine, but also, are we going to level fund? And that's what we're planning on for the next 7 years, or do we have growth expectations? Do we have additional positions? Do we have plans to create maintenance funds or whatever it is for buildings? We're talking about a senior center and rec facility. Is there a plan for if that comes to fruition, how that's going to get paid for? These are the kind of things where if all we're gonna do is say, yep, just keep plodding along and there's zero expectation that we are going to change anything with operations or staffing for that 7 million, then that's fine. That's what I would like to know. But if there's plans for growth, I want to understand what those are.
Can't
and
that
what
commitment
cost
come
is.
from the board though? And so, and I was, the
Yes, I
same.
think it can.
The same year that, and we all know that I built my model based off of what Shrewsbury did, right? They asked for $9.5 million, and that same year, what did they do? They developed a strategic plan, because the select board said, we just asked the town for a lot more money. And that year, they developed a strategic plan, and since then, every budget decision, every staffing decision, every organizational decision is based off of that plan. They didn't have it before they asked for money.
That town is not Rutland.
Right.
This town has a bad history
Well,
of
hold on.
not being
So
transparent.
change
and
the
saying
paradigm, right?
where- I would love to.
We could be Rutland forever, and we probably will.
This town is not gonna change overnight.
Until we change the leadership from the select board level, with all due respect to the board, we will always be the same Rutland that says, we don't have a plan, we're gonna pay a lot of money for all these plans, it's gonna go on a shelf. So every year, we're gonna be in a reciprocal crisis,
That's
I'm
what
gonna
we've been
say,
saying.
right? So, and you know what? Like, I'm looking through our master plan right now, there's a lot of stuff in there that we have already done. So why don't we also give some credit to some of the work that's already happened? And the board has a lot of good ideas. First of all, your plan is your goals that you establish every year. You guys have a lot of good goals in there, but even a $2.5 million override, you won't accomplish them. Right, so I think that the board can do a lot of work to continue to think big picture. And say to the town, whether it's 2.5, 5 million, 7 million, whatever number, those numbers were just, I wanted to give you examples to show longevity. But it's on the board, right? I mean, you guys are the chief policymakers and have to think big picture for what the organization looks like. And it's our job to execute that and make that happen. But,
I just don't think without some sort
I need
of
to know what that
vision-
looks like, and Harry, that was a non-answer. You didn't tell me anything about what you'd wanna see. So with all due respect, it's like, sure, yeah, nothing will pass, because there's no leadership from the board here about what you think the town
There is
should look
leadership,
for
but
in
not
a
on
budget.
6 million or 5 million, Austin. We don't have leadership on that, you're right, but it is
Well,
on
so-
2.5
Well,
million.
but hold on, can we also take a look at, we have a model, right? And I looked at, based off of the assumptions of, yes, I agree that, we can do some work and find efficiencies. But let's just say still that our expenses are growing 4.5% and schools are growing 10%. That's still that's still costing money, right? So I'm not thinking strategy here, other than I'm looking at numbers, right? And what's a number that will make us, that will establish some longevity from our financial position? This has nothing to do with our master plan or strategic plan or anything else, other than what does it cost to run the town and pay our school assessments? That's it, right? We can then take the resources and the confidence that the voters gave us, hopefully, and then make some strategic decisions with the resources that they gave us. But, I'll be honest, your half and half budget, your deficit next year is 2.8 million. Your full cut budget, your deficit next year is 1.8 million. Right, so we've gotta figure out how to get the town and reset our base for stability in the long term, right? And, even next year, it's 1.5 million if we did 2.5 million.
Well, let me ask you something, if we do the 2.5, what's the deficit next year?
I just said that, 1.5 million.
Okay, and if we do the 50-50, what's the deficit next year?
Also just said that 2.8 million.
How did that change?
'Cause you added
We
$1
took
million.
care of the 2.5 this year, so how did that push forward to say all of a sudden it's now 3 million.
Because that's, it's only for 1 year.
Yeah,
It's
Oh.
only to cover next year.
Well,
Yeah.
2.5 is only for 1 year.
yeah. Well, but hold on, but your 1.5 assumes, right, so your deficit for this year, right, cause it doesn't assume an override, right, cause you didn't decide that yet.
Oh, so wait a minute, so you're deciding that next year we're gonna make everything whole again? That's where the extra million comes from. Although we cut this year, we're gonna make everybody
So
whole
give me
next year.
1 second, I'll add $1
And I
million.
really, you know, Austin, I really don't wanna get into the number. What we're trying to figure out.
Well, this is the time to talk about the
No,
number.
what we're trying to figure
right?
out here is the four of us right now, without Tom, are we gonna pass a budget tonight?
I don't know, well, this is the board that exists right now.
Right,
Right,
that's what I'm saying, but
the
it
board
shouldn't.
has to make decisions, and because we'll never make a decision if there's not a board member here, not a board member there. So to answer your question, I had just added $1 million to the tax levy. If we did a half cut and do $1 million override, your deficit next year is 1.7 million.
With reduced services,
With
because
reduced services,
you're not putting
right,
those
so
services
cutting $1
back.
million and still asking for $1 million.
So you'd essentially, if you, again, want to restore those services, you'd be asking for
Double the amount.
2.7 million.
Yeah, to get that back.
To
Yeah.
get the
Well, actually,
services
no,
back.
Not even, that's just 4% based off of our cut, right? So we're still cutting, and then it's a 4 to 4.5% on our town budget, so are we gonna get back those positions? Probably not. Are we gonna restore some of those budgets? Probably not. So,
And I will say, one of the concerns is that the override, the restorative override that we did a couple years ago got us to a staffing level where we should be, the low end of a staffing level of where we should be for a community this size. It didn't take into account, it didn't leave any extra levy capacity, it didn't take into account growth or anything like that. It was very much, in my mind, a restorative override to get us where we need to be. A 1-year override for this year would not be restorative, it would be maintenance, it would maintain where we are. It's not going to provide any big opportunities for growth or anything. Again, we can have those conversations and look at how to look at the staffing and everything, but I can say from the past couple years, it's exhausting to come out of 1 year knowing that we're gonna have to go into the next year looking at this all over again. And I think to say this was kind of a little bit of the CPA argument in the fall also, well, you don't have a plan, so we're not gonna pass it. But we can't have a plan until we pass it, so we can't,
I disagree, I disagree, and I'm sorry, I don't, like I said, I go back to, I want to know what, we've already heard some feedback from residents. Why do we have all these positions that they feel are unnecessary? If you're asking somebody for money, I would like justification for why you need that. And I understand, like, I'm not asking for a full strategic plan, but again, something. Show me what you feel like we need as far as growth. How many new positions? What is that estimated to cost? I mean, we just had a conversation with Nancy where her salary is not where it should be. So if we need new positions, do we have other positions that are not at the salary that they should be for town? These are the things that you need to be able to explain. And again, or are we just saying, all we're doing is staying exactly where we are, nothing is gonna grow, nothing is going to change.
so like
And
this,
that's what this is gonna cost, and that's all we're asking for,
So-
then that's fine.
Shrewsbury, I'm gonna keep bringing them up because they're a very well-run community, and this is what they did. Their select board and finance committee and school committee went on a Zoom call, cause it was during COVID, and they jointly agreed on a policy statement, an override commitment. There's a list of things here that they went through and they agreed on. You know, so for example, they said it was no Prop 2.5 overrides for at least 4 years. 4 years. I just watched his presentation to the finance committee. It's lasted 8. It's gonna last 8. Because they, you know, better economic conditions, that can happen for us. General education spend, 4.25. So is this what you're asking for? Like we can put, this is what they did. They put this out and they continue to
Yes.
talk about this.
Yes, exactly.
So select board as policymakers can put this together.
But we don't have time to do that between now
You
and
can start
asking
now.
April 9th.
Well, see,
Why
my
not?
question to you, Austin, would be, I'm looking at Shrewsbury, and that's great. I wanna know comparable towns like ours
So true.
who have passed 5 and 7 million overrides. overrides, that's what I'd like to know for one. Comparable towns like ours, bedroom communities, who don't have a lot of business, who aren't luxury the way Shrewsbury is. To even suggest that we might want to do, but I'm not in favor of it anyway, so.
So do you wanna talk about like comparable towns and what they spend? Like this?
Before I consider
So these
5
are-
or 7
so
million,
these
I'd
are
say,
the
yeah, but
comparable-
I'm not considering it. That's not my vote, I won't
Yeah.
vote for that.
So these are
okay?
some comparable towns to us, this is the new tool that we have. So these are comparable towns that were given to us by DOR, and this shows us what we spend on everything in town. So to give you an idea, like, you know,
I was hoping I know you guys
yeah,
did this, sorry.
probably not. So, you know, are we similar to Upton? How much do they spend on their general government? They spend $1 million more on their general government than we do.
Okay, but did they pass a 5 and 7 million override?
I don't know.
Well,
But hold on, we're talking about.
Does Upton have a lot more business than us?
No,
Okay.
not at all. They also don't have access to a highway. You know, so if we wanna compare to like communities, that's why I built this, because we're always gonna say, well, the question that I'm gonna ask people is, well, what community are we similar to? And I'm gonna put that town on here, because this is gonna show that our base is not right. Whether it's for general government, whether it's for police, fire, actually, the only thing that we spend more on, according to this, is fire, sorry, chief. But education, we're still low, right? The state tells us that we can spend $7 million more our ability to pay, right? So we know that according to the state demographics for us that we're low. We're still the lowest spend and lowest tax, well, we're the second lowest tax rate now in the Wachusett School District. So, you know, benchmarking exists for a reason, we can compare, and that's why I did this, right? So we can really, you know, see how much we compare. And to be honest, Harry, you're right, there's probably not a lot of towns that have done a $7 million override, because they probably spend the appropriate amount of money on their services, because their residents have made a commitment
That could be
to
right,
make sure
but
that their tax
I'm
levy
not
is.
ready to make that decision tonight.
Yeah.
Okay?
So how do we,
So, you know,
what kind of resources do you need? Do you want me to pull up the ballot votes and we can
no,
look at the
I
history?
wanna know where we stand right now. If one of us changes our mind, then we're to go. If we haven't, then we're no-go. Whether it's 5 or 7 million, doesn't matter.
So can I make a motion again?
Sure.
Make a motion that we proceed with a 2.1 million override for fiscal year 26.
Motion, is there a second? I will second. Is there any other conversation? Roll call, Paul.
No.
Ledger, I.
Segment A.
Whitman, aye.
So can I just ask a question? What if Tom can never come to a meeting again?
Shit.
Because we know he has a different work schedule, which is no fault of his own. We know that he's very unlikely to be able to make a meeting. What if he doesn't come? We can't accept an email. He has to vote.
And he needs to be in public.
Correct.
It has to be an open meeting. We can't have a text message or an email blast from him or anything. It
Not
needs,
for, I wanted to know unofficially how he feels.
But it doesn't
everything
matter.
needs to be official.
The public needs to know officially how he feels, though.
You're missing my point.
No.
Yes, you are.
I understand your point.
No, you
If
don't.
you,
No,
I
you
feel,
don't.
may I?
Yeah.
Harry, I feel like what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you're saying that if you felt that you had the full opinions of the board, that you could make a more informed decision for yourself.
No, I'm not saying that.
Then
What I'm
please
saying
explain.
is, if Tom votes yes, then have him get his can in here and vote yes.
And then
But we don't know if he's gonna vote yes or not.
I thought you had asked at one point for an email or something from him telling how he felt.
No, yeah, I wanna know what his idea is. Get him in here. If he wants to pass this thing, then get him in here and vote to pass it.
That would be
I think
great.
Okay, but what do you think
Okay.
is right, Harry? Aside from what Tom thinks, what do you think is right long-term for our fiscal outlook?
I think right now, we do what we need to do to fix the situation, and I'm not sure 2.5 is gonna pass.
Yeah.
But you're
And
not
then
giving.
next year, we start really concentrating on the next 5 years.
So, but
And
next
if we
year,
need to pass a 5 or 7 million next year, we look at that.
so are you
Not this year.
are you ruling out in future years a bigger override?
No, I'm talking about this year.
Yeah.
That's all I can
Given your
see.
background in financial planning, what, do you see these numbers and not believe them?
No,
You're not giving the residents an opportunity to maintain the level of services they currently have.
yes I am.
And-
If,
You're not, because your budget calls for $1 million worth of cuts,
I
which is
said-
not the same as what they
I'm-
have right now.
okay. You know, I wish maybe I should have put it in black and white so everybody could read it. Because obviously I'm not explaining myself. I wanted the 50-50 so that if we adopted that, we could go around the board and say, you know what? We have an option. Instead of 1 million override, we could do a 1.5 and then only cut a little from the town. That's where you work on the budget. I'm proposing a proposed budget, not an actual budget, because we haven't worked on it. Because I'm afraid you go out 2.5, there is no option you have there to work on anything. It's 2.5, if it passes, great, if it doesn't, gone, slash. And that's what I'm afraid of. Not that I have to vote for 2.5, I want the option to work on it. And you say work on it, well, you know, here it is. Thank you, take it, rubber stamp it, done.
Harry, we've had it since Austin provided it to us and we've had it on the agenda and it's always, I wanna see it, I have questions, I wanna look at it, I'll talk about it with Austin. I don't have any comments, I don't feel comfortable talking about it. It's the same, we just heard it just right now. We'll talk about a larger override next year or the year after. We're continuing, to Paul's words, kick the can down the road without actually doing the work. And we've had
So do you have a problem with my thought process?
we
You
need to make,
personally have a problem with me?
no,
Then let me do what I wanna do as one of the members of the committee, looking for the people who elected me, what I see they need to do. That's all I'm asking. And what my proposal is just an option.
we need to make a decision, Harry, that's what I'm saying.
Well, then you change your mind.
Can I ask one question, please? Whatever you decide to do, will you make it clear to the public that it's a temporary solution so that, to your point, when you said it was just restorative, that they
Right.
understand that?
Right.
Okay.
You're gonna have to.
Well, I mean, it didn't come across that way last time. It was, you're gonna bring us up to exactly where we're
agree.
finally gonna be where we need to be.
Right.
So.
And I think that that's been a disservice that historically we as boards and staff have done. We haven't been truthful with residents because it's a hard pill to swallow. It's just like the superintendent providing the data that the schools aren't doing as well as we all hope that they are doing, right? Like, it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard pill when Austin comes to us in September and says, guess what? You have a $2 million deficit this year and by 2030, you're gonna have a $10 million deficit. But no one has ever wanted to look at those numbers truthfully and honestly and have the conversation. And now we have that and we're unwilling to make a decision other than continue to cut services that we just restored.
Well, exactly, and
And-
those numbers tell you the story, wherever
Right.
your break-even point and higher
Right.
is where you
Right.
need to be,
Right.
regardless of what it's being spent on.
Right, and we can continue to try, and we have continued to try to realize efficiencies, and we no longer have an HR position, and we're looking to regionalize that because we feel that there is strong value to having HR, but we're continuing, we are working with fire to investigate fire districts and see if there's cost savings to restructure the way we do fire in town. We continue to explore these options, so it's not just a rubber stamp that we have this money and we're not gonna continue to try to realize efficiencies. We are. And I think we have shown that commitment, but to your point, like.
Just to tell people, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
But to Nancy's point, if we don't make a decision, we're never gonna educate.
We don't have any.
Can,
I mean, it's March 5th.
Right.
can an override budget be a citizen's petition?
You know what?
An override budget via citizens
Came up
petition.
last year.
Well, so a citizen's petition, can you do
The
it?
select board has to vote to have an override ballot, cause
Yeah,
they're
but
voting
all
to
night.
put a question on the ballot, so
But the question, can a citizen also do that by petition? I don't know.
I don't think so. I'm.
Well, I guess my point is, if they make a decision to do this, and the citizens feel as though it's a terrible decision, can we say, screw that, here's what we want? Why, I mean, that seems like something that,
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, if we do a budget that says there's a 2.5 override, you can amend on the floor to reduce, but you can't increase, is that correct?
you have to have a funding source. You have to present a funding source.
So if we did the 2.5, somebody could amend on the floor to say, I don't wanna do that much for this budget, I want this much. I mean, I guess, does it matter what,
Well,
if
that
it's on,
doesn't change
if it's
the
on,
override
I was
ballot
gonna say, if it's
question,
on the
right?
question
So
for
you guys
2.1,
would set
it's regardless of.
whatever the number
The
is.
amount, yeah, right.
Never mind.
So yeah, so the ballot question increases the levy, right, and then town meeting appropriates the dollars.
Okay, so that's, yeah, never mind.
If I could, I just, with the absolute utmost respect, Harry, I think that we should let the citizens decide, if they want an override or not. And it's very possible the citizens will say no, but we don't know that without a ballot question. And the ballot question is surveying what the residents want.
I appreciate that. But they would have a choice under the 50-50 if we put the 1 million out there as an override. They still have that choice.
I don't think that's accurate.
That's not,
I don't think
That's
that's
not an
still
accurate
cutting
statement.
services.
No, but I'm
With
just
1
answering
million.
her question, that they still would have
You're
it.
not giving them the option to keep what they have. You're saying, we want more money from you, but we're still gonna take things away from you at
We
the same
don't-
time.
We know 2 years ago, or two and a half years ago, citizens voted yes in favor of this level of services.
Right.
We know that. And so now we're saying to maintain this level of services, this is what it costs. And so you want to maintain that level of service and that's what it's gonna cost. Or,
That was supposed to be for 4 or 5 years.
No.
but that,
But that's what was presented, 4 to 5 years.
but it was presented with a.
inaccurate.
It
I think it was
wasn't
stated
accurate,
max
but-
3, but whoever said that was
But even
wrong.
it's,
Bad
and
projections.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask to be recognized.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
you're fine.
I think to go back to my proposition 2.5, we are on a perpetual override. And I, just sitting here thinking and reflecting, is that at the end, at 2030, we're gonna be $10 million, so that's 2.5 every year. And that's not gonna fix us, it's still gonna be 2.5 million plus forever.
Yep.
So
My point.
I think we're trying to put it into a box and it's not a box we're fitting in. And so whether it's 2.5 this year or whether it's 7 million, it's still gonna be 2.5 million every year forever. So, and I think that people need to hear that, because if you're saying it's 2.5 and we're going to be level services, the implication is that we don't need this, because it's, an override's supposed to be an extreme case. It's not supposed to be to balance the budget every year. And I think we're just balancing the budget, but we're doing it in chunks of 5 years. And then you're gonna do a $7 million again in 5 years.
Well, I
So-
think respectfully, it's our tax levy is our strongest and only recurring revenue source, right? It's how we fund our services across the board, whether it's town municipal services or school services. We don't have a lot of other pots of money to turn to. So, this is resetting our recurring revenue to make sure that it matches our recurring expenses, right? So, if we're projecting that our expenses are gonna increase at X rate, we've gotta find a way to fund that with our recurring revenues. That's the,
But then we're just disregarding Proposition 2.5.
well, that's why it exists.
Yeah.
That's why there's a reason why when Proposition 2.5 passed, they put something called an override in place, right?
Right, but it's not supposed to be forever. It's not supposed to be every year or in chunks of 5.
Yeah, well, but that's also assuming that costs grow at 2.5%, but they never have and they don't.
I agree. I mentioned
Right?
this to Mike a couple weeks ago when we were talking about this, when 2.5 was first implemented back in the 80s. $1 in 1980 does not go nearly as far as it does in 2025. So whereas a 2.5 cap back in the 80s and even the 90s was covering all those recurring expenses, especially lately with inflation rates as much as they've ballooned, it doesn't cover anything anymore. So we are severely limited, and there's no way that our 2.5 cap keeps up with all of those other, in a lot of cases, insurance expenses that we don't have control over.
So
Well, actually,
I'm very limited right now.
I'm pointing
No,
something
you're
out.
absolutely right.
Take that as a citizen who then you need to educate with the information that I've given you, you need to educate because to your point about services and where people want it, but there was a conversation about show me the betterment of the education. If we're spending more on education, where's the betterment? I think the same thing with services. What are we getting for the extra services? And again, take what I'm saying and educate me too, because I'm looking at $2,400 for the next, if you did a 7 million, that's $2,400 every year for 5 years. And then the following year, and before I know it, it's gonna be 12, 13, 14,000. I mean, I know people that have already got a $10,000. So, you can talk the millions and the overrides, but it's the people that have to write that check.
Yeah, can I just make a couple of points? Jen, to what you're answering, you're absolutely right, because in the 80s, but what they did, until the overrides came, I think in the late 89, what they used to do is, if the budget, instead of an override, it would hit that 2.5, they would cut services. And then they would bring it back 2 years later. That's how I lost a full-time police job. And then the overrides came in, but you're absolutely right, the dollar amount doesn't just. But it was supposed to match all the years. No, you're absolutely correct. And it was tough in the 80s, but they did it. But one big point, other point I just want to make, you're talking a lot, and I agree with everybody saying about the budgets and the increases. And we're talking about the effects that is on the town, but you also have to talk about the effects on the residents. The cost of the residents, and the residents need to make a choice. I absolutely agree with you. There should be something on the ballot. I don't know what level, but I fear, and this is just my fear, considering I'm in that senior citizen bracket, the higher amount, as justified it is, and I can see the numbers, I know the numbers, they may not pass it. But they need a choice of something, but they need to be educated. Can you survive without the services at this level? If you can, you vote no. If you can't or don't want to, go for the override. But the people need a choice. A choice has to be decided by the select board. Whatever it is, 1 million, a choice has to be made. But again, I think the residents, and I don't know if we have enough time right now to do that, but I would like to see it maybe in the future and maybe some public input, maybe some, we can't do that right now, there's not enough time, but the people do need a choice. That's it.
I think, I guess I look at it also as if we say to the residents and that we're providing them the choice, the option with the full override amount, the choice to fund this, keep the services at the level that they are. If that fails and the board wants to defy the financial policies and throw $1 million or $1 million of free cash or the $1.3 million in stabilization, add it to make that cuts less. Again, that's gonna not solve the structural deficit. It's still gonna result in $1 million in cuts. It's essentially Harry's 50-50 budget, which he's proposing, if the $2 million doesn't, and I firmly am against utilizing the one-time revenue, especially knowing that we're budgeting more and more and more closely and we don't know where government aid is going to be. So our free cash may not be, we've had a couple years of good amount of free cash, but we also had ARPA money in there that we were able to apply to line items and everything. So some of those items cleared as free cash, And again, it's in our financial policies, and we've made the commitment that we need to start taking care of our infrastructure, and so that's how we can utilize that. It's taken us, I think, roughly 5% of our free cash allotment gets put into our stabilization. It's at 1.3 million now, I think. That's, I think the past couple of years, it's maybe been $40,000 a year, roughly. That's 30-some years, I think, of savings. And there's been some years that we've been able to put more in. But to deplete a stabilization for one budget that's not going to set us any better off next year is wholly fiscally irresponsible and is part of what has gotten us in this position on the free cash side. And I would hope that FinCom would use their advisory capacity to advise against that level of detriment. And I think then if it doesn't pass, then we need to, then the voters have told us, live within the 2.5, the Prop 2.5, live within your means, and that's what it is, and that's what the cuts are, because that's where we are, personally.
Leah, to your point, I think that if we go for the override and it fails, I think as a town, we have to accept the consequences of that. Yeah. I think to go back after the fact and say, just kidding, we had a backup plan, now we're gonna throw money at it, I think it makes us look like the boy who cried wolf, and the residents are gonna say next year, we know they have money elsewhere if we fail this. I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't stick to our word of, if it fails, this is what happens.
And that's, I stand by that 100% because I'm against using those one-time revenue funds, period.
Yep. The board voted that into policy just a few months ago.
Right.
So I think that discredits